All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're so incredibly excited to welcome you to this discussion of issues and challenges presenting to career development professionals. So we appreciate you taking time to join us today. My name is Elizabeth Cronk Warner, and my pronouns are she and hers. And today I'm coming to you, although we're virtually, I'm physically located in Salt Lake City, which is in the Salt Lake Valley. And I want to acknowledge that this land was traditionally indigenous land. And what's really nice about this area of Utah is that this is the valley that tribes would traditionally come to for meetings and for gatherings. So it seems really appropriate that we should be gathering here, at least some of us physically and virtually in the Salt Lake City area, because this was a land that was traditionally used for that purpose. I really am appreciative that we're holding this session today to talk about an important topic, and that is, of course, career services and career development. Our career development dean, Arturo Thompson, likes to say that career development is at the heart of the law school, and I think that couldn't be more true. Not only are you helping students find careers, not merely jobs, but finding the career that works for them, but you are also holding hands and wiping tears. And in this day and age, there are quite a bit of tears, I'm sure. So it is a challenging time, both because of the pandemic and because of this racism moment where we find ourselves in, where members of our community are constantly being challenged by deaths and killings and everything that is happening in our society on top of this historic moment of the pandemic. And those of you working in this field are really finding yourselves front and center in this time. And so I'm so incredibly appreciative that we are able to hold today's session and to bring you together here at the S.J. Quinney College of Law. And I would really be remiss if I didn't give several big thank yous today to several individuals for their hard work that they've put into this event. And it's not the first event, right? This is the second time that we've had a chance to meet and gather. And so it's not just for their time and effort for this event, but we're also really appreciative for time and effort that they put into the first event. So I want to acknowledge Charlie Stewart, who I know is on the call. He probably has his Zoom blanked right now, and Spencer Cope. They are both from our events teams / IT team. In the events world nowadays, a lot of that overlaps with IT, so they're kind of straddling both and taking on and learning new duties. And then, of course, Chris Monty, who is our amazing director who oversees our events team, who just does a phenomenal job of bringing these events together. And so we really appreciate Chris and her team and everybody who's worked on this event. But of course, I want to acknowledge our career development team, our director, Jacqueline Howell, who's just been doing a fantastic job and we're so privileged to have, and Jim Holbrook, who is a gem of a man and truly phenomenal, and does a great job of kind of walking us through the challenges of these pandemics. And Cynthia Lane, who is the career development executive assistant who keeps us on track and helps us all. But last but not least, I do want to acknowledge and thank Arturo Thompson, who again is our Dean of Career Development, and who said, you know, we had such a good chat the first time. We didn't really have enough time to get to everything. Can we please have some more time? And so I think he's really the man behind this conference. And so I really appreciate him. It's a joy to work with him. He's really a great partner and he's just done such a fantastic job. And so a huge thank you to Arturo Thompson. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Beth. Beth?
Thank you so much, Dean Cronk Warner, and thank you to Dean Thompson and all of you for hosting this great event today and for including NELP. We are delighted to be part of this, and we weren't part of the first one and heard great things, so we're just thrilled to be part of this. We, of course, love it when NELP members come together to collaborate and share best practices. It's what we do best, and so it's wonderful to see so many of our colleagues here today. I just have a couple of quick announcements on the NELP side, just for all of you. A lot of this was in the NELP Now yesterday, so I apologize if I'm repeating what you've already read, but I just wanted to make sure that you know some of the things that are going on. So one thing, since May, NELP has hosted more than 50 webinars and town halls. All of those have been recorded on the NELP website, so thank you to all of you who participated and who helped put those together, but there's a lot of great content that the NELP staff worked to put together. And so if you missed any of them, you may just want to scroll through and check some of those out. We still have some coming up, including a town hall on September 1st, next week, focused specifically on small and solo CSOs. And also, in case you haven't seen them, in partnership with law firm e-learning, and we have a task force, a work group developing the professional. They have launched already 3 great videos that you can offer to your students. There are going to be more videos coming up, and if I can do this, I'm going to try to drop it into the chat, the link, just so that you all have it. And then finally, I just wanted to remind you all that we have a couple of great events coming up. We will be hosting the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference. That will be virtual on October 7th, and registration is open now. And soon we will be opening registration for our public service mini conference that will take place on October 22nd. And then lastly, this year, just because, as you all know, with the shift in our whole worlds in lots of ways, many of us have shifted our on-campus interviews as well. So the surveys that would have normally gone out in the fall to schools will now go out in the spring about the results of recruiting this year. Law firms will be getting a survey pretty soon, though, about their summer programs and outcomes. So stay tuned for information on those. And so with that, I think, Arturo, I'm happy to turn it over to you to take over. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Beth. And thanks everyone for making it. We checked registration this morning. We have 204 people. So that's a crazy number. We had 115 the first time. So we're expanding. It's also lovely to see faces that I know from all across the country. And so thank you for making it. I'm going to be really, really quick so we can break out into the sessions and get to work. Just so you know, unless you're someone who is sort of built into sort of seed questions, you will be randomly assigned to one of the 2 sessions this morning for the first round and then again for the second round. But we're all going to come back together 15 minutes after those breakouts. And so we'll be able to share ideas. And we'll also be trying to sort of record and memorialize some of the key aspects of that so we can circulate that. I will also circulate the responses we got, although I'll anonymize them, to the questions that we asked at registration, because I think they may be useful to people. And so expect to get that from me, hopefully beginning of next week, depending on how crazy the weekend turns out. I also wanted to acknowledge, and it's sort of in the spirit of something that the Dean brought up, Elizabeth, that it's the anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech. So it's a historic time, and these are very challenging times. Frankly, if it was not for this conference, I would be down at the state capitol right now marching. And I may do that as soon as this conference is over, but acknowledging the fact that it's a challenging time, right? And so we all need each other's support, and the larger community needs our support. And then I want to thank very quickly everyone who's participating and has been instrumental in planning and executing this from the presentation side. So Beth Moeller, who's from UCLA, who all of you know is the president of NALP, Angelica Evans from University of Texas, who is a great colleague I've known for many years, Heather Spielmaker, who she and I have this odd relationship of sort of following and not following each other for jobs around the country. But we're bonded. She's at Kansas now, which is where I was before. Pascal Bishop, who we met as a part of this program, who's at Northwestern. And then Linda Moore, who is actually from a firm from Stinson. Stinson, as many of you know, big firm, and she's joining us from their Kansas City office to give us some firm perspectives in some sections. And then Jacqueline Howell from my office, who the Dean introduced, who is really the backbone of our office and has been the key to our success. And you all know me, Arturo Thompson. And so with that, I think I'm going to request that we be split into our respective rooms, and depending on where you end up, you'll know what you're talking about.
And I shared a chat message that has some, I think it's maybe 8 or 9 different ideas for how to do recorded presentations. You know, obviously, the recorded voiceover of a PowerPoint slide is one that a lot of folks are reverting to. But we came up with a lot of other creative ways that different schools are addressing, how to give that content. So I've shared that with everyone. Arturo, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Arturo Thompson. I'm the Assistant Dean of the Career Development Office at the S.J. Quinney College of Law. I've been here since October of 2019. Prior to that, I was at the University of Kansas for about 8 years, which is also where I graduated from law school. I practiced for a number of years in Phoenix and in commercial restructuring. And before that, I was in advertising. We are incredibly excited and thrilled to have everybody here to join us. I think Heather may have already said this. This is really a conversation, not a lecture. So it's about trying to think about how we do this and how we go forward, and ideas. The registration reflected a lot of schools that are doing interesting work in different ways, but also a lot of people are like, I don't know yet. I'm trying to figure this out. And I also think this is not a conversation that ends and begins here. It's sort of the thing we keep doing either through email, one-on-one, or in small groups, or through our NALP community, or whatever else. So that's sort of my thought. And I'm deeply concerned about trying to figure out what's the best medium for delivering the parts of our message. So my one sort of great freak out thing is how do we convert firms, because they're a large employer for us as an example, into more than just a list of names, right? Where they all sort of get intermixed. And then how do we convey to people how they choose between different employers, what formats work well, what technology works well.
All right, it looks like everyone should now be able to see the list of different styles for doing online programming. I wanted another show of hands, I guess, informal survey. How many people have already produced some kind of recorded content? All right, and how many of us have done the voiceover PowerPoint slides? Okay, that does seem to be the most popular. I was going to talk a little bit about, for the process of logistically how we produced ours, but then I also wanted to, give some examples of some of the other creative ways that career services offices within law schools, and some of the examples are outside of law schools, have come up with for sharing their content. And I did have a couple of examples that I thought we could watch together. Let me share my screen. Anyone here from Santa Clara? That's too bad. I was hoping there'd be somebody from Santa Clara. I thought they did a really nice voiceover. I won't play very much of this because it sounds like a lot of us have experience with this format, but this was one nice example of a voiceover PowerPoint.
I'm not sure we're getting your audio, Heather.
What was that, Arturo?
I'm not sure we were getting audio.
Oh, okay.
With the slides.
That is unfortunate. I don't know how to work around that.
Can you send people the link, the URL?
Yeah, I did. So I guess everyone can take a look at those later.
I will say in a similar format to this, and this was pre-COVID when I arrived here, 2 of our faculty members on the Judicial Clerkship Committee had done sort of like a between two ferns kind of thing, between the 2 of them, just talking about clerkships and why they matter and how do you do that and what do you think about that. And it was sort of quasi-scripted, and it was just audio, but it was brilliant. So I think if you have a couple of people in your group who are good at that, that may be one of the ways to carry forward that audio channel. Are you pulling up second item, Heather?
I was trying. It doesn't look like this is working very well. I apologize. It worked when we practiced.
So while we're waiting, and Heather, if you can get that geared up, we can run back to it. Does anyone want to share like anything you've discovered as you've been trying to work through this problem about the best way to deliver content? Are you doing video? Are you doing, you know, voiceovers? I see some people I know, so I'm willing to call you out and ask you. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Eric Bono. Don't smile.
You know, I don't know if this is on point, Arturo, but not so much on the content front, but what we're finding is that at least over the summer, we had relatively low attendance at our programming, although the good news is it seems to be picking up. And our students have been surveyed by our SBA and are saying that they really want to network. And so we're going to be leaning heavily into Zoom chat rooms and trying to get students talking to each other and to our guest attorneys. So that is our current strategy. We'll see how it goes. It's pretty early in the year.
I like that suggestion for programming because that takes it away from just recorded content and makes it interactive. How many other schools are, you know, aside from career fairs or something, are trying to schedule synchronous programming like that? All right. Does anyone want to share some more details about how they're using synchronous programming? The concept for this was, yeah, we'll give you a few ideas of what we found that other schools are doing, but we really wanted to focus on the idea share and hear more about what all of our colleagues are doing. So if somebody'd like to tell us about another way they're using synchronous, that would be a great opportunity for us all.
Hi, Heather and Arturo. This is Betsy Armour at USC. I'm happy to say something.
Please.
A few different things. Back to the kind of recorded thing. We did little videos, kind of like what you just saw from your example, using a technology called Powtoons, where it's more like kind of cartoony, but we did both cover letter and resume writing videos that have been really popular with students. We also just recently have done some videos, kind of voiceover, showing students how to bid and that kind of stuff, thinking ahead about recruiting. So that's one stuff that's, you know, in the can. But what we're doing, we're having a week, in a couple of weeks, where we're going to be doing chats with our alumni leaders in a few different key markets outside of Southern California, namely Bay Area, as well as New York and DC. So bringing together students who either were working in those markets last summer, or quote unquote working there. They might have been in LA, but working for a New York employer, whatever, bringing those folks together, because we would have had you know, meet and greet in-person events over the summer, but those didn't happen. But we wanted to somehow replicate that opportunity for the students to start to meet alums in the key markets where they're looking to work or where they already have hiring commitments. But we're going to expand it to include all students to have these you know, real-time chats, if you will, to introduce what makes that market tick, but also to do the networking connections that Eric is talking about as well. Because I have the same experience where I think a lot of students are just super eager to get out of their box, their Zoom box, and actually talk with people. So happy to share more, but those are a few ideas.
You mentioned animated recorded sessions. Do you know anything about what kinds of technology you're using for the because we've all seen those, and those can be that can be a cute way of presenting material. Do you know what program you're using for that?
Yeah, sorry, it's called Powtoons, like cartoons, but it's POW tunes. Again, full disclosure, somebody much smarter, two other colleagues in my office much smarter than me actually produced them. But they do have kind of a limit on length, unless you want to kind of go, I think, pay for it and go, you know, get their, you know, their premiere version. So they're short, they're only like 3 minutes, but they really are cute and they're substantive, and we found that students love them. So I do recommend that. And if anybody has questions, I can direct you to somebody on my team who actually produced them.
Betsy, I'm going to ask this, is somewhat a delicate question to ask in this group environment, but would you be willing to let us see those at some point or give us a link so we could see what you guys have done?
Sure. I don't know if I can do
You
it.
can send it to me and I can circulate it to
Oh, yeah,
everyone
yeah. Of
afterwards.
course. Yeah,
But that
of
would be
course.
great to learn
Yeah, I'd be
from.
happy to.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy to.
So Powtoon, so that's brand new to me. I've never even heard of the program. So that's exciting. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. One really quick thing, Arturo, I apologize. The way I heard about it, just full disclosure, is through attending a NACE conference, which is the National Association of Colleges and Universities, or whatever, colleges and employers. And I heard about it through Yale University's undergrad career services office. And I'm happy to share mine. I will send it to you, but they have on their career services site publicly available a whole bunch of examples of Powtoons, and that's how I heard about it. So if people want to both look at mine, but also other examples, that's where you can find it as well.
Nice.
All
Other
right.
folks?
Yeah, let's hear about some other creative ways that people are recording or hosting virtual programming.
Anyone? So someone chime in and cut me off. One of the things that we're doing is we're going to start doing top 5s and top 10s. So top 5 resume tips, top 10 interview tips. They'll be really quick, video recorded, looking pretty extemporaneous, sort of done off the cuff, although they will actually be pretty well produced. And we're going to do those using, sort of whatever camera we have at home. Might even be your phone's camera, to try and create a little bit more of a level of intimacy around those, but also trying to keep them within like the 2-minute time frame, so that a student could pull those up, maybe to actually get the advice, but also frankly to feel a little more connected to us. So that's one of the things we're trying to put together. And then we're putting together some more canned pieces, and Jacqueline, who's hosting the counter session right now, is running that in our office, but she is driving some pieces that will also engage alumni. So like an alumni interview or alumni conversation that'll be recorded on, like, what does a firm look for? What does in-house look for? Or what does a government agency look for? And so that a student can, again, watch a 2, 3, 4, 5-minute video at most, and get a flavor of that, in and apart from all the other sort of ways that we're communicating.
And Arturo, one of the examples that I posted in that chat is kind of a hybrid of the two ideas you just discussed. It was an employer giving a top 10 resume tips. So I think that's a really nice way to approach this. Is we're finding that employers really want to have the outreach with law schools. They're used to coming in and giving presentations and being part of panels. And this year that creates a lot of difficulty because, obviously we're not doing panel discussions live. So we've had a really good response from firms wanting to be involved and find a way to be involved. And that's a great way to kind of farm out some of the recording, responsibilities and, the actual responsibility for creating these recordings is to ask firms to handle it. They often have IT support and can produce really quality presentations, giving, for instance, a really good one that we're pursuing right now is, talking with a firm recruiter and the 10 worst mistakes they've seen happen at an interview, or the 10 things that impress them the most, or the 5 or whatever. And I think that is key, what you mentioned as well, that we want to keep things, as short and succinct as possible. We're not looking for 1 hour, 1.5 hour recorded presentations. We're looking for 2 minutes and 5 minutes and, 10 minutes tops. So that creates its own set of difficulties and obstacles this year, and that we're used to doing 1 hour long presentations, and now we're trying to get everything that we want to say about a topic out in shorter bits. Does anyone have any ways that they have addressed the need for making shorter, more succinct presentations in a recorded offering?
Deborah Henley from Florida State.
This is Joe from University of Tennessee. Oh, sorry.
Deborah, why don't you go first and then we'll go to Joe.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Love Zoom. Love Zoom. So we're going to do a series of short videos for the 1Ls on the key issues that they need to be thinking about: summer jobs and resumes, cover letters, that kind of thing. Keep them very short, but then require that they watch them before they come to see us for their individual individual meetings with us. We're certainly not going to deny anybody the opportunity to see us individually if they fall short of watching them all, but we're going to strongly recommend that everybody watch, I'd say 4 or 5 short videos, and then they'll have the background information to come and see us. And we also require that they have a resume and a cover letter when they come to see us, as close as possible to the formatting that we're recommending and showing them in our materials.
Deborah, when you talk about making sure that they have they've done that, are you tracking that electronically, or are you just doing it like in an honor system?
No, we're going to track it.
Okay, so you're actually like looking at the back end. Did they log in and watch that video, or?
We are. Now, are we going to
Okay.
be tight about it and jerky about it? Probably,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
we're gonna try that. And
Right.
they'll seem to be a little bit more fearful that they're doing things right than the
Yeah,
two
no.
else.
You have to embrace the power of the 1Ls still are a little bit afraid of us.
Right.
Yeah, by the time they're 2Ls, where they're totally jaded. Joe?
We have a
Oh.
chat question first before we move on to Joe
Okay.
for Deborah. We have one of our participants asking how you're tracking, and I think that analytics is a really key piece. It's something that we don't have as much access to with live programming. Can you tell us how you're tracking?
We're gonna try it 2 ways. We're going to try it through Simplicity, through their what is it called? Mapping. I think it's pathways. But we're also going to try it through Canvas. We have a Canvas site, and we've asked all the students to sign up for the Canvas site. And so if we do it as an assignment, then we'll see that they will have done it.
Yeah, I'm for the first time, I'm learning Canvas. It's actually been most of my week has been buried in Canvas, trying to learn that so we can set up a course for the same reason. So.
RIT wanted us to post our presentations on YouTube, which gives us the benefit of being able to see how many views, but not specifically who viewed. So what we are doing is creating a CSO boot camp, which is for video, how to do the resume, how to do the cover letter, all those things. And then we're asking students to sign a statement attesting to the fact that they watched those 4 pieces for the boot camp. And then we'll have another boot camp that focuses on interview skills, and then another boot camp that focuses on networking skills. And that's what we're going to try in lieu of being able to track specific viewers.
Great. Joe?
Thanks, guys. This is Joe from the University of Tennessee. Deborah is along doing a lot of things and similar to what we're doing. We're also going to be tracking some of our shorter programming that we're breaking up into sort of those 10-minute, or shorter chunks, tracking that through Canvas, because I think that's going to be a good way to sort of keep track of who's doing what. The other tool that I did want to share, though, is for those programs where we're doing sort of PowerPoint with voiceover type of setup. We found a new tool that I think is going to work really well. It's called Loom, Loom, and Loom allows you to, especially if you're doing something like a resources training where you're showing some websites while you're doing that voiceover. It allows you to sort of show where you're clicking, and you can highlight some things on your screen. It has some different features like that, as well as having sort of a little window up in the corner with your picture, with your video the whole time. So it's a little bit nicer than some of the other things that we had tried in the past. And there is a free pro version or upgraded version for education employees. So something to take a look at if you want a tool there.
Nice. That's
another one
idea.
I haven't heard of.
Yeah, that's another new one. Brilliant.
We did get a question in the chat that leads me to another topic I thought we could share ideas for, and that is, how are you distributing these videos? So specifically, the person asked, how are the videos being distributed in the CSM or email or other? So I'll start. We're sending out an email that will have a link to the 4 required videos, as well as a link to the statement in which the student attests that they've watched the 4 videos. what other advertising strategies are people using to make sure that students are aware of and or are watching their recorded presentation?
So anyone, please chime in. For us, what we're going to do is everything will be posted within the Canvas course that we're setting up. And unless there's something truly proprietary, we'll have it'll probably be replicated on our public website as well, sort of our student section for the CDO, so that they can access it in either place. The nice thing about the Canvas setup, as I'm getting to learn that, is that we can, you could create links for like the videos and then documents and then other materials and other sort of break it down to categories, but you can also replicate, right? So that if I have a resume video, I may want to have the resume sort of guide with that and some other materials. And so you can cluster them in different ways. So there could be 1L stuff that's relevant and resume stuff, and it may, those are two different bins, but some of the same material will be in each bin. So as a student drives to it, they don't feel like they're having to search, which is one of my concerns, is to make it as few clicks as possible to get the answer that they're looking for. And if they're going to get the answer, make sure that it's comprehensive. Is someone using something besides Canvas? No? Make sure if your mute's on, make sure it's off. But I think Canvas is pretty ubiquitous.
I wanted to ask, how many people are storing their recorded presentations in Simplicity? There is an area of Simplicity where you can, okay, so Gwendolyn, at least I see, Betsy. Are you finding that students are finding them okay and that they're being used and watched? We've found that we have fewer students that will click and log and successfully watch when we post in Simplicity. I wondered if anyone else is experiencing that.
Full disclosure, we haven't done it yet, but my view is like, let's make them available lots of places, and hopefully they'll figure out there's some, that they're somewhere. So document library and Simplicity. We also have many of you probably do too, a password protected kind of law portal where we house a lot of content. So we're putting them there also. And then just sending them via email. And we have a weekly online e-newsletter too, where we have kind of a compilation of announcements and other kinds of stuff. So we use that as well. So it's kind of like spaghetti on the wall. Hopefully it'll work.
And Heather, this is Gwen. You're right. We are planning on posting them into like housing them in the Simplicity document library. We've always posted our recordings of programs there. We have no way to track and see actually how many students go to it. This will be something new for us because previously they were recorded programs of a physical program. Now we're going to have to truly see how much is being utilized by students just going to watch some of the videos. So I don't have any idea how it's going to work, but that is what we're going to do. We're going to email all our students. We typically do it two ways. We typically email them the direct link so that they can watch it, and then also let them know if for whatever reason it will be housed in the Simplicity library also. So we're crossing our fingers to see how that goes.
This is Tammy King from Washburn. And one of the things that I'm doing, first off, speaking for the small solo CSOs, I'm essentially a solo when it comes to program content creation. So, there's a little bit of bandwidth issues of trying different things. So as of right now, I'm still a Zoom girl. So I have my PowerPoints and I'm recording over the PowerPoints. And in terms of getting it out to students, I'm trying to mirror what our professors are doing. And what our professors are doing with their Zoom recordings is they're creating playlists. So I've created a PDO playlist, and so all of our videos will be there. So it's just one link that I'm sending out to students where all of the videos will be stored. So when they go onto it, they'll see the informational interview video and the researching employers video, the resume video, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really great point that Tammy brings up, and it kind of relates to something that Molly brought up in the chat, and I'll bring up her other question too, but this idea of creating one space where everything goes, but then also replicating what's being used elsewhere in the building so that the students don't have to learn a new metaphor or a new program. That's the reason I'm learning Canvas. Is in our school, Canvas has always been a standard tool, I guess, here at Utah. I never used it at Kansas, but because I know my students are already there and they're already used to that, I think it's incumbent upon me to build stuff into Canvas rather than building, otherwise I might choose a third party tool, and I just want to make it easy on them. But Molly also asked a really good question about, do people find that it's counterintuitive, Canvas, or students are frustrated by it? I don't know. I don't think my students are, at least according to my faculty, but that may be my faculty living in faculty world, right? So
We've had some other good chat comments. I hope people will take a second to read these because we're getting some great ideas. We do have some people who are concerned about when you post them in too many places, does that become confusing? If you're like, for instance, we have a career services Facebook page. We've definitely encountered that where we want to kind of streamline and have one place that you go to find all of, that we direct everyone to every time. So there is some concern about that. We've had we had somebody mention that they use Blackboard for their courses. So they created a Blackboard page for career services. I've done that with past jobs, and that did make sense. I also wanted to talk, we've had comments about e-newsletters, and sharing of information about what programs people are using for those. We just started an e-newsletter. We're using Publisher for it. We've had people mention they're doing MailChimp. We've had somebody mention something called My Emma, which I'm not as familiar with. Can the person who talked about My Emma maybe chime in and tell us a little bit more about what that's used for?
Hi, this is Lorelei from the University of Oregon School Blog. We use My Emma, and I think it's very similar to MailChimp. I used MailChimp before, but this is something that our university, the main campus, has a subscription to. So it's where you can kind of build your message, and it tracks like how many opens and who clicked on what link. And so there's a lot of tracking available to see what content people are looking at or who's opening it, or so we like that feature of it.
cool.
I think that's, a really important one is that analytics. And I think that that's one of the things we want to look for moving forward is who has the best analytics, so we can see, are people going back and watching more than once? Are they watching because it was assigned, but then also watching right before the interview to help them prepare, immediately before an interview? That's our hope. Our hope is that, a side effect, a good benefit for having recorded programming is that students have access to it right when they need it on demand. And I'm interested to see those analytics to see if that happens. If we have a sudden, flurry on day one of OCIs in the spring of people going back and checking those interview tips. We've also had a little bit of discussion start on an important topic as far as whether we're password protecting our content or not. I know my instinct was to not password protect it. I want to make it as easy as possible for students to access, but there is some content where, for instance, we subscribe to the Vermont Law State Judicial Clerkship Guide, as well as the Arizona handbooks that talk about the deadlines for government honors programs and public policy programs. And we are required to not share login information and passwords with the general public. So for that kind of content, we have agreed by contract to not share the password, so it would have to be protected content that only our students could access. Has anyone else encountered, how are people feeling about password protected versus not for most of your programming?
And I'll chime in for myself. My instinct has always been you publish it publicly unless there's something super secret and special. I think, as NALP members, we all steal stuff from each other constantly, right? I mean, I can't enumerate the number of things where I've emailed someone later and say, hey, by the way, I stole this, thank you. I remember doing that with my colleagues at Baylor. They created something a number of years ago, and and I sent them a thank you note after we created it and a copy of it. And part of that is I think it's good to share. Part of that is ease of access. I also think, you know, it helps, frankly, to promote the school, right? Like, we brand it, put our logo on the front end of it, and it helps to make us a thought leader, or at least perceived as a thought leader. And I think for all of us, right, it's competitive on the admission side.
We've had a helpful comment from Becky at University of Oregon saying that with Simplicity, you can actually track the individual student views for each resource. There's some settings that you can adjust so that you are able to see which students have viewed in the Simplicity platform. Let's see.
Deborah says it's not
wants
stealing,
to
it's
assure us that
borrowing.
it's borrowing, not stealing, and that it's the most sincere form of flattery, says Tammy. Let's see. So another thing that I thought we should talk about before our time comes to an end, which I can't believe it's already 10:48. How are people incorporating diversity and a variety of viewpoints into their recorded and synchronous programming? I think we're all trying to be more intentional about making sure that our programming represents diverse viewpoints. So I was wondering if somebody could talk to us about what their school has done to encourage that.
I just think we have to be more sensitive about who we invite to speak on panels and who we invite to present topics. I just think we have to be very mindful of that. But we're also going to have a special series for students of color where we present alumni and practitioners of color in different areas, different subject areas. So the big law one, the medium-sized small law one, the government one, the judicial one, maybe state and federal agencies. And we will invite the whole student body, but we're going to make sure that those individuals who have had to come up through those areas of law have, the opportunity to talk about their unique experience and the different barriers that they faced and how they overcame them and got to where they are. So that's something that we're looking at doing. We're going to run that by our diversity and inclusion committee to make sure that's appropriate, that's something that they would like to see, instead of just me or others thinking of things that they may want to see, making sure that it's something they actually want, that they feel would be useful.
We've had another comment from Holly mentioning that they work with the Affinity student organizations and helping to develop the programming calendar, asking them what types of speakers and topics that they'd be interested in hearing from and on. Anyone else want to talk about how you're encouraging diverse viewpoints in your program?
This is Lorelei from the University of Oregon. I'll share that I am also the chair of the diversity section for the Oregon State Bar. And so in that capacity, I'm a part of our Affinity Bars leader group. And we had a meeting, and all of the leaders of the various affinity bars in our state decided they really wanted to do some programming for law students. And so they broke it up and decided to have a monthly Zoom session and drop in and networking arranged around topics. And I gave some suggestions, and so it's turning out to be a lot of career services type topics. And then they had each of the different affinity bars decide to host a particular month, although it's kind of a collaborative effort. And so that particular organization is sort of organizing the speakers. And so it's turning out to be a kind of a nice year-long programming that we don't have to organize, which is great. And then each of the different affinity bars get to pick kind of who they want to have representative. And so we had our first one, and I think it went really well. So I'm excited about that.
Nice. Brian Morgan, I think you had something you were going to add?
Yes, we're from Faulkner University in Montgomery, Alabama. And Fred Gray, who was Dr. King's attorney, and John Lewis, the late John Lewis, was from locally here. And we have an annual Fred Gray Civil Rights Symposium, which we will conduct online this year. So my advice, use the people that are local, who have fought the good fight.
That's excellent. One of the things we're doing is I've asked Jim Holbrook in my office, who was mentioned when we had the introductions at the very beginning of this conference. Jim is a senior attorney who's worked here for a long time. He self-drafted without anyone asking him to, and then published an essay about overcoming racism as a white person, right? Overcoming being racist, right? Having been raised in the environment he was in, and that's on our website if anyone wants to look at it. It's a pretty extraordinary document. But Jim is I think widely regarded as sort of one of the best lawyers in the state, but also one of the best people. You know, just an incredible level of comedy and quality as a human being. And I've asked Jim to put together a professionalism sequence for our students in each year. So maybe 4 or 5 events, some of which will be shared, or maybe 5 or 6 events. And if they do X number of them, they get, you know, like a check mark, like a certificate of some kind. But part of that, one of the requireds in that sequence will be a session that's purely DE&I focused. But the other thing we're doing is on all the other sessions, and frankly, like when we're doing our resume session or when we're doing our interview session, ensuring that we're including a DE&I component in that, right? Talking about diversity, equity, inclusion in a very material and sort of tactical way as it applies to whatever the topic is, right? Like in interviewing, you know, the kinds of questions that are appropriate, the kind of things that are appropriate, and also, frankly, what's an inappropriate question from an employer and how that should be flagged or responded to, and trying to develop those sets of qualities across the board.
Hi, this is Meredith Wiggins. I'm an assistant director at University of Kansas School of Law. I was previously with the CSO for several years and rejoined last week in this new role. Prior to that, I've been working at KU in the undergraduate and graduate student career services that focused on serving the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And one conversation that we were having was simply setting an institutional policy as an office. We don't have panels that don't have, or that are entirely white or entirely male, period, the end. That if we cannot find enough representation to make sure that there is underrepresented groups are included, that we don't do that event because we don't actually have enough, resources to do it properly. And that is a policy that I advocated for. I don't know that it was ultimately adopted, but we discussed it quite heavily over the course of the summer.
Does anyone else have similar policies? I really like that. That's a very, affirmative stand. I'm interested to hear if any of the other schools have considered anything like that.
Can I ask you, do any of the schools, we've only got about 5 minutes left, do any of the schools have a dedicated DE&I program for, say, your 1Ls? Either a sequence or just an individual event? Can you guys speak a little bit about as to what those are?
Arturo, this is Eric at Denver. I'm happy to share what happens in Colorado. And it also includes the University of Wyoming Law School. But there's a consortium of about 40-ish employers, mostly large firms, but also some corporate legal departments, and even sometimes some nonprofits who have all signed the Colorado Pledge to Diversity, which is a broader effort, but the most well-known part of that is the paid 1L summer clerk program that these organizations commit to. So to be in the pledge, an organization has to commit to offering a paid 1L summer position to a student who is diverse. And the schools that participate are currently University of Denver, University of Colorado, and the University of Wyoming, since we're also close together. And it's a 2-round interview process with networking events, trainings, etc. along the way. And the interview process is kind of similar to a matching process as opposed to a pure interview process. And if anybody wants to talk more about it, I can talk offline, but that's the major effort in Denver. There are also some individual firms that offer their own standalone 1L diversity programs that include a scholarship on top of pay.
Hey, Eric, if you have like a one sheet or a description that you maybe send out to students or whomever anyway, if you'd forward that to me, I'll include that in the mass email we send out with resources.
Yeah, I don't know if we have a one pager because the pledge is actually a nonprofit, so they control the documentation, but would the link help? They
Yeah,
have a
that'd be
nice
great. And a
website.
description, and I'll just copy and paste that into a larger document.
I'll send it to you and I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
We did have one of our participants asking whether or not any schools have created mandatory DEI training for students. We did incorporate into our mandatory orientation for 1Ls DEI training. Has any other school incorporated that as mandatory?
This is Becky from University of Oregon. We did something similar with our orientation. Students received kind of a lot of resources related to how to be anti-racist and how to be part of an anti-racist law school. And then that was reiterated in a training at our orientation. And then we actually reserve a section of our first year professional planning course to talk about lawyering across difference and building skills around cross-cultural competency. And that has been received well over the last couple of years by students.
We've had a lot of comments saying, yes, we've incorporated this into orientation. I think that's great. That's a really responsive. That means schools got right on top of this and included it in orientations, which for the most part have already taken place for 1Ls. Any other comments? Let's see. Eric has now shared the link to the Colorado Pledge to Diversity. And we've got someone else who they're going to have mandatory DEI training for students and staff that will begin next week.
Just so everyone knows, in your chat window, you can go to those little three buttons where to the right of where you would type your message, and you can actually save the chat if there was a bunch of stuff in there you wanted to keep saved, and it'll save it into a folder.
This particular chat might be a valuable time to use that feature too, because we've had a lot of people mention technology and platforms and programs. Yep. And some really cool ideas. I'm having trouble keeping up with them all. I super appreciate the participation that we're having with this group.
So they might suck us back in 1 minute, but does anyone have any questions or thoughts or something they'd like to address? I'm looking at the chat as well.
I'm gonna do my best to, when we share with the large group what we've discussed, I hope I capture everything, great ideas, and if I miss anything, I apologize.
Oh, all right, so I've got the command to leave the breakout room. It'll close in 53 seconds. Anyone, anything? No? No? We could do like 30-second trivia.
Very helpful, thank you.
All right, see you in the main room. We're all going to share.
Okay, good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us again for our second session on recruiting during a pandemic. Some of you are actually joining us for the first time and we're unable to attend the first COVID conference that took place in July, so we're posting the YouTube link to the first CSO recording in the chat field for you to review after this wraps up. I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now. So I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself and my co-panelists, Angelica Evans. I'm Jacqueline Howell and I'm the Director of Career Development at the University of Utah's Jay Quinney College of Law. I've been with the office for over 12 years. I joined in 2008, just before the start of the last Great Recession. So I feel like I've been around the block. My educational background includes 2 master's degrees, one in legal studies. I earned that here in 2019. I'm also the current interest group chair of the NELP Legal Masters Group. I'm excited to be here with you today. And also I have 2 naughty dachshunds who I'm hoping won't bark during this whole entire presentation. Angelica.
Good morning. How is everyone? I'm super excited to be here. I had the privilege of meeting Jacqueline a few years ago when we were collaborating on actually a platform trying to make sure that we are all getting, using the best technology possible. So that was exciting and now interesting that we're back here now looking at this from a different, perspective. Out of necessity now more than anything. Before it was a bit of a luxury now that we look back at it. So I'm with the University of Texas School of Law. I've been here since 2008, and that was right before, like literally days before the market crashed, right? So I feel like we've been through a lot since then, 2008 to 2020. A lot has gone on, but it's been very interesting, and I wouldn't still be doing this job if it weren't for such great colleagues and all of you out there who are, again, like willing to collaborate. Look how many we have here today, 204. That's just absolutely amazing. So with that said, I work with, I'm the associate director, and I work with students who are interested in JD Advantage type jobs and in-house counsel positions. But I also work with our admin staff, and I'm in charge of all of the employment statistics and reporting, and work very closely with all of the programming efforts. So that's why I'm here today. Oh, I'm also on the NALP ABA Employment Outcomes Committee, which is how I got to know Arturo very well. And then it just comes full circle with him, or with Jacqueline working with him now. So this is just, again, awesome to be collaborating with all these great people.
Thank you. So something that we think we all quickly noticed on the July call, the July call, is the sheer interest of CSOs across the nation that wanted to be able to brainstorm with one another on best practices related to on-campus recruiting, particularly how to run a successful program during a pandemic. Other topics of interest included best practices for online culture building, virtual programming and presentations, and the opportunity to share what they've learned about various platforms through which everything discussed today will operate. However, our little program today will focus on fall and spring recruiting because you can't spell COVID without OCI. And that was all Angelica. I love that title. I think it's so great. The goal of setting up the session and meeting format is to keep this interactive and to allow for a steady exchange of ideas. So please remember to keep yourself muted unless you're ready to contribute, which we all hope that you will do if you can. We're going to just follow up on best practices, establishing OCI and recruiting in general during a global pandemic. I hope that our discussion will shape best practices moving forward, particularly with respect to ongoing virtual interviewing during COVID. Although all of you have been randomly assigned to various conference sessions, you're all stuck with us this morning. I'm sure many of you have interest in learning what is happening in the other meetings. So please rest assured that the whole event is being recorded. You'll have the opportunity to review all the sessions soon after the meeting has ended. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I do have some slides. I'm the type of person who likes a visual, so I'm gonna pull this up here. So let's get to the beginning. I'm gonna share my screen. All right. Can you all see that? Okay.
Yes, yes, we can. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Trying to get organized here. Okay. All right. So Professor Jim Holbrook, our Senior Director of Special Projects at SGQ, he's going to watch for questions in the chat and any raising of hands as we move through a variety of topics today. And we'll have some slides so that everyone can follow along. And then I can also share this with all of you later on today if you'd like to keep these. So as you may already remember, The May 2020 Now Pulse report indicated that over 71% of law schools had canceled their fall on-campus recruitment in favor of spring OCI to start in either January or February. We're learning now that some law schools are actually starting their recruiting in December. There are actually a few schools, however, doing fall OCI. And let's hear from one of them. Joining us today, I hope she's here, is Tiffany Tucker. She's the Assistant Dean for Career Development, and her colleague Courtney James, Director of Employee Relations and Development, both from the University of Houston Law Center. They held a virtual OCI earlier this month and will be offering some anecdotal information about their OCI experiences over the next few minutes. Tiffany, are you with us? Courtney as well? Maybe not.
I wonder if they're in the other room. Accidentally.
Well, let's see. They were actually supposed to be put in our room, so I'm
Yep.
wondering. Okay, well, we'll just wait until they're added to our room, and then we'll come back to this. Sorry, guys. So Angelica is going to take us through the next couple slides. During registration, we asked the schools a few quick questions. Your responses were fantastic. We will be moving through the following slides, so if you haven't yet responded on behalf of your schools, please feel free to chime in. So with that, Angelica, let's go ahead and move to a
Okay.
next slide.
So the first question I think we asked is, how are CSOs working with employers directly to ensure their needs are met in lieu of fall OCI? You know, basically we're talking about here, how are we going to make sure that we are, you know, connecting the talent with the employers when they need it, if they need it now, before December, January, February, whenever it is that we are now going to be hosting our OCI. So some of the answers that we received are, can you switch that slide, Jacqueline, please?
Yes, sorry. It's just taking.
I really liked all of your answers, and a bunch more came in since we, I guess in the last day. So please chime in if you have something that is very different from this and want to share with us. But I'll just go through these several ones, and I would love for you guys to jump in with your thoughts, your ideas, so that it's not me talking. This is meant for all of us to learn from each other. So the first one is allowing employers to post jobs outside of fall recruiting, particularly military, government, and public interest postings with early deadlines. I think that's obviously going to be critical, right? Because some of these employers don't have the option of recruiting in the spring. This is it. This is their timeline. So I know some schools will parse out public versus private OCIs and interview programs, but not everyone does that. So I think this is critical to be able to make sure that the employers have access, right? Does anybody have comments or want to speak to that? Anyone? No? Yes, everyone's in agreement. Okay.
Are there any schools out there that are not allowing employers to post jobs at all during the fall, or is everybody kind of in agreement on the need to do that? I'm just kind of curious.
I think that's
all right.
Hopefully a no-brainer.
So we're all doing. Awesome.
So next we have the pre-recruiting aspect, right? Some schools said we offer pre-recruiting to manage employers who want to interview earlier the next available OCI. I think this is an interesting topic. I understand that some schools do not allow pre-recruiting at all. So how do you, I guess, manage those expectations for employers as well as students? Do we have anyone online anyone here in this room who falls into that category that would like to talk about that? Nope.
You know,
all good.
Sorry to interrupt you, Angelica. Just to mention, you know, one of the caveats, and this is something you're going to touch on in the next point. I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but you know, we offer some pre-recruiting for employers, but we are giving them the caveat, you know, that students may still plan to participate in spring OCI. And so we try to manage employer expectations at the same time as allowing employers to do resume collections, or if they want to interview, even though it may not be through the school, that we allow them to do that. Well, they also know that, you know, they need to be knowledgeable that some students may also want to do OCI, and they may decide to accept an offer from OCI. We don't encourage them to do that. We don't like that at all as a career services office, but sometimes that does happen, where a student will accept an offer in the fall and then want to accept an offer during spring OCI. And so it just puts everybody in kind of an awkward position. So that's kind of what we're trying to do at SGQ, is just manage those expectations, and hopefully, you know, employers will go into recruiting understanding kind of the full.
So that is time consuming though, right,
yeah.
Jacqueline? Because those are conversations that you have to have individually with employers who are choosing to, you know, to do their recruiting outside of
right.
the traditional programming.
Yep. I'm happy to talk about this at Northwestern too, if it helps.
That'd be great, Pascal. Thank you.
Of course. So we're sort of making a division between our traditional big law OCI employers and other types of employers, to be honest. In years past, we've been actually very forward moving on recruiting. So back in an old timeline, we would poll our OCI participating employers if they wanted to do pre-recruiting, and we would counsel students through it. This year, we're not doing that because we want students to feel like we're supporting the idea that they should be allowed to have 2 semesters of grades beforehand. That being said, students approach us. So for example, we've had a couple of students reach out and say, I heard that some of the firms in Texas are already putting up portals, and I really am interested in that market. I don't want to miss my window. Mm-hmm. And so for those students, we are assisting them. So primarily our focus is on the student need, and yep. Students are looking at government. If they're looking at mid-sized employers, we're posting those positions, and if the employer wants to use a platform that we have to do the interviews, we'll be happy to do that. But basically, we're discouraging the NELP firms who want to do early recruiting from posting on our Simplicity system, and we're not hosting them early. We're asking them to wait until January. So with those firms, it really is just about students approaching us saying, I have a reason to think that I want to do this earlier, and if we think they're in a position to be successful, we'll support them with that.
So if to recap, so if an employer has it up on their portal, they have these openings up on their own portal, and a student finds it and says, hey, what do you think? Do I need to wait until OCI starts? Do I need to go through your office, or can I go ahead and do this? You're encouraging them to go ahead, apply.
Well, it depends on the student. Obviously, it'll depend on a lot of criteria, prior work experience, GPA, all of the usual things that you think about as to whether they might have a better chance if they wait for more grades. But if a student's well positioned, that we think they might just be an overall good pre-recruiting candidate based on prior seasons of recruiting, then we are assisting them with documents and mock interviews and things like that.
An excellent point about the grades. Especially if they are, had a GPA that they were hoping was going to be a lot better after that second semester, they might need to wait, which is a good question. Y'all may have touched upon this the first go around of this it's been a month now. Did anyone give grades, I guess? Anyone that's on this call, anyone have grades for this spring semester? No. Okay. So we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat then.
Sort of. I wanted to add that we've had a couple transfer students whose schools gave them the option if they wanted grades or not. And that's actually led to some complications in terms of my second semester I'd hoped would be great, and because of COVID, because of everything, it's lower than my first semester. How do I explain that? So that's been an interesting discussion with that small cohort of new students that we're working.
Very interesting.
This is Nikki. Sorry to interrupt. This is Nikki from Thurgood Marshall School of Law in Houston, Texas. Our students were also given the option to receive a letter grade or a pass, no pass.
Hi, Nikki. How is that working out?
It's been challenging because I would have rather them just say we're just going to do a straight grade or a straight pass, no pass, because I feel like it's going to open up the floor to questions from employers, especially who are interviewing students from the school who may have opted for a letter grade versus someone who opted for a pass, no pass. So far, we haven't had an issue, but I'm anticipating that we might.
Yes, that seems really tricky. Ooh, like you needed an added challenge there.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you all for sharing that. Let's see, what else did some of you say? You said we're hosting virtual employer spotlights. Oh, I really like this. On a regular basis throughout the fall so that students can utilize that time to better get to know local organizations who are going to participate in spring OCI. So this is really neat. So, you know, they're still getting information and education about who the employers are and knowing that they are interested in hiring from your school. So that's kind of keeping the communication lines open, I guess. Is the person who wrote that here by chance? Or is anyone doing something similarly?
I can speak on behalf of SJQ. We are definitely hosting employer spotlights during the fall, and I really actually like this. I know once we go back to fall OCI, it's going to be something we may have to revisit during the summer and start doing employer highlights early on in the summer. But you know, this opportunity gives the students, all of the students, 1Ls, 2Ls, 3Ls, who may not have the opportunity to get to know the organizations attending fall or spring OCI. So these virtual spotlights really give them an opportunity to get to know the recruiters and get to know maybe the interviewers who are going to be coming to campus and get to know kind of the culture of the organization and see if it's really something they would be interested in. I think that's really going to help drive applications. I think a lot of times our students tend to go into this blindly. They often come to our CSOs and ask, you know, who should I apply to? I don't even know what do these firms do, you know, and is this something, you know, that I might be interested, an organization I might be interested in joining. And so I think these virtual spotlights really help with that.
So Jacqueline, can you speak a little bit as to the format that you all use, and also like what class levels? Is this only geared towards 2Ls, or can anyone attend?
I think what we'll do is, you know, as far as the large law firms that also have a 1L program, you know, we'll be cognizant to, you know, who it is they're hiring. I don't think we'll limit it though, even if, you know, an organization comes and isn't perhaps looking at 1Ls, those 1Ls, if they want to join in on that info session, they'd be able to kind of get a better sense of the organization and if they would want to apply the following year as a 2L. We are going to try to do these. We're trying to decide what would be the best format, but they're essentially going to be small info sessions. We might turn it into more of like a you know, coffee chat type of opportunity for the students. So we haven't totally set in stone how we're going to do that, but we're definitely going to have a series of employer spotlights where they can come, you know, the employers can virtually meet with students and answer any questions that they might have. So similar to a career
fair.
fair.
Live chats, definitely.
Yeah, but it won't be a career fair. It'll be a lot more informal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I know one of the things that we're doing is having basically a giant networking event that we typically do for 1Ls. We're going to do another one for 2Ls. So table talk type situation.
And I was going to add, I recently was watching a presentation by Seifarth, and they were talking about mock interviews and how they see this fall, although they're not recruiting until you know, the spring, they see this fall as a great opportunity and time to be doing mock interviews with 2Ls. you know, in ways that are kind of screening and similar to some of these employer spotlights. So I think that there may be other employers and firms in particular that may use mock interviews as an opportunity to connect with students and keep those lines of communication open, but not doing formal interviews until the spring or January, winter.
Thank you for that reminder, Nicole. Mock interviews is huge, right? Whether it's a formal program or an informal type of situation, this is going to, you know, keep your students ready for when, you know, it's really go time. And who knows, some of these mock interviews oftentimes turn into real interviews or real opportunities, whether it's with that particular firm or organization or someone that they introduced them to. Does anyone else want to speak to mock interviews? Nope. Okay.
Hi, this is Tiffany Tucker. I'm the Assistant Dean of Career Development at the University of Houston Law Center.
Hi, Tiffany.
Hey there, guys. So great to see you. So great to hear all of these great ideas. We started with our virtual programming this summer and did weekly, what we call CDO virtual career chats, and did basically a wide range of a lot of what you guys are talking about, either webinars or interactive training sessions or spotlights of lawyers. And it was very successful. We also used Zoom and Simplicity for our OCI and we give mock interviews all year round, as a lot of us do. Mm-hmm. And then in the fall and spring before OCI, we have a formal mock interview program where we invite local practitioners to help us mock for all the great reasons that you guys just listed. And we use that as our practice round, our big practice round for our full OCI. And we had the full week of OCI. Virtually with Zoom and Simplicity, and plan to do everything virtual this year. And we have several networking components. We call our attorney spotlights lunch with a lawyer and dinner with a lawyer, where we'll invite one and, you know, a particular practice group and invite students. All students are welcome to just learn about what they do. And we do a mix of 1L focused attorneys who would come out, as well as 2 and 3Ls. And then for our recruiting programs, we're having three big recruiting processes. One is OCI. It'll just be a smaller version of what we just did in August, but the other 2 are table talks. So we're still trying to figure that out. Leading up to those recruiting events, though, we will we have a full week of programming where we're inviting several panelists at different times to talk to the students about what they do in those areas. We are having a JD Advantage career table talk, and then we'll have a week of programming for panels so that students can learn about what they do. And then a small and mid-sized firm open house that we do, where that week we'll also invite attorneys to speak in a more intimate setting about what they do. And then 2 big networking events, one focused on mentoring, and then the other focused on meeting OCI employers, getting them primed for January OCI. So we plan to do all of that virtually, and the students have really been coming out and really been enjoying the programming.
That is fantastic, Tiffany. Congrats on having a successful August virtual OCI. That's amazing.
I owe it all to our programming team. It was definitely them. They played around with it, as someone mentioned before, learning brand new skills to make it happen. And it pretty much went off without a hitch. We were so thrilled and had over 50 employers, over 300 interviews, and our programming team just handled it all. It was fantastic.
Awesome. Can you speak to the kind of the mix of employers that came? Was it mostly private sector? Did you have public sector as well, or how did that work?
It's mostly private sector. Our big early week OCI is mostly typical multinational, big multinational firms, but we also had a few government and public interest and smaller firms, and I believe a few companies also participated as well. So we get a mix, but primarily large multinational firms.
Very good. How would you say that compared to your typical in-person August OCI?
Less running around on our part. And it was actually Courtney James is our Director of Employer Relations Development.
She's awesome.
She is amazing, absolutely amazing. She worked with our program manager, Casey Branch, and our program coordinator, Sanchez Steele, to develop a system whereby they develop manuals to send out for timing and to walk the students and the attorneys through the step-by-step process. And they, in the first thing in the morning, when you have most of everybody converge at the same time, they got all of the employers into their rooms, and then at the same time, every 30 minutes would move the students over into their respective rooms. The students were amazing. They were absolutely thrilled to get to do this and not have to literally run back and forth from our various interview rooms.
In this heat.
In the heat, exactly.
And the humidity.
Suited, exactly. They all showed up just looking exactly how they should be looking, with the right background and lighting and all of that good stuff. We were incredibly proud, and we got really great feedback. The first day we just had a few hiccups because the attorneys were late, and we were trying to move them all at the same time to keep them from mingling in the waiting room. But even then, the students showed resilience and just gave us that feedback and said, but no worries, employer was late, plus I was a little late getting into my room. So I just asked them if I could send them a Zoom link and continue my interview. And they said yes, and that student got a call back. We're still waiting to hear about the actual offer. But that literally was the only hiccup. And other than that, excellent feedback from the students and the employers that it worked really well.
Fantastic. So did you then use your proprietary Zoom account to manage the whole thing through Simplicity?
Yes.
Instead of having each employer use their link, which seems a bit untenable to me, but I would love to hear more about anyone who has done that.
Yes, we wanted to hear more about that too. We had gotten feedback from various places that some firms felt like they kind of gotten the word out. If they have to use their own technology, then they might as well do the interviews on their own time as they want to. Why participate just doing a particular time with us if they were going to have to do it on their own anyway? So we just created the Zoom links, and so one firm would have their own room through our Zoom and got the information through Simplicity. They would be there all day long, and then we gave students the individual links when it was time for them to log in. So Simplicity was just, we use it as we would in general, just to create the schedules, and then we attached a Zoom link instead of a physical room. There was a Zoom link for that time in the room that they needed to go into.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Does anyone else have questions about that or want to speak to anything they've already done? No? Awesome. Congrats again.
So we have about 10 minutes, and this is all fantastic information. We're just going to kind of fly through some of the next responses, and please feel free to share. Let me just move us to the next slide. Okay. Angelica?
All right. Now, the next question we asked is, how is CSO planning to mitigate potentially reduced turnout during spring OCI? And I love that at least one person said, now, whoa, 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 don't you be thinking that it's going to be reduced. I think it's going to be better. So I'm like, excellent. That's what we want to hear. And we're hoping that that's how it goes, right? But let's start with some of the other responses. So we had, let's see, the first one, working with internal and community partners to create enriching opportunities for legal experience. And that's what it's all about, right? How are these students and recent grads going to get the experience that they need to go out there and be the attorneys that we all want and need them to be when things are kind of in a holding pattern for in a lot of ways. So I like that, going out and creating additional experiences, thinking outside of the box. That's the next one. Encouraging the students to think broadly. this harkens me back to 2009, 10, 11. You've got to get creative and not be thinking just like, okay, this is how things have been done for the past few years, employers that come to us. No. How are you going to market yourself and be stand out, right? I think that's what it is, and create, how are we going to create those opportunities for our students? So someone else said, called employers over the summer to stay in touch with those who regularly hire our students and graduates. How important is that to maintain our relationships and improve upon them with our, with our employers who already know and love our students? We want to make sure that they don't, that they're out of sight, out of mind. We don't want any of that. We want to make sure that we know what it is that they're looking for, what they're needing. Obviously, every day is a new day. We don't know what is out there, what's coming, but we can only do as much as we, what do we know at the moment? If we're staying on top of it and knowing what the employers know, that's going to help us to better counsel our students so that when they are ready to hire, we are right there front and center. So next, let's see, made increased and dedicated efforts to encourage our alumni to hire students in internship or law clerk positions. That is excellent. Who else to tap into? Who's the first source of potential additional opportunities is your alumni. Hopefully all of you work very closely with your alumni relations teams. I think they're not only an incredible source for helping to find mentors, but again, when at times like these, a lot of them want to help out. Maybe it's not with a paid position sometimes, but they can either help mentor a student, or they can help connect them with other opportunities and sometimes it may be volunteer, but again, we want our students to be as prepared as possible when the time does come for them to be up for that position. Next, someone said, encourage more one-on-one counseling sessions, launching a resident associate program, and alternative experiential learning opportunities. This resident associate program sounds intriguing to me. Is anyone on here who knows anything about this? Nope, no clue. I don't know. That just sounds to me like, it just sounds extremely appealing. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what this means. But yeah, but one-on-one counseling sessions, definitely we need to know what the students are thinking, where their heads are at right now, making sure that they are staying safe and healthy, and that they are aware of the opportunities that we are creating for them. And, nothing worse than creating all this and then not having them apply or take advantage of it. So any conversation, anyone want to chime in about that? If not, we will move on. What do you have for me next, Jacqueline?
Do you see this current slide?
How are CSOs being transparent with students about the impact of COVID on the legal market? We're figuring it out day to day, right? We're figuring it out ourselves. So how are we making sure that they know that we're on top of it? I like this. Counseling students on hot practice areas and employment opportunities outside of the big firm environment. Yeah, knowing, us knowing what are the areas where, this, turning it on the positive, not making this all negative, where maybe encouraging them to start looking a little more closely at areas such as bankruptcy, healthcare, litigation. Somebody mentioned JD. I think Tiffany talked about having like a special spotlight on JD Advantage positions. Absolutely. Just as with the downturn of the economy, we need to start being creative. This goes again to the creativity, and there's all sorts of jobs in the JD Advantage realm that our students would love to have and are well paying. And there's an abundance of them, whereas you have a very limited and finite number of legal jobs, especially at large firms. You just don't have that with the JD Advantage. You have a lot more opportunity. Small firm opportunity as well. rural, somebody said rural, which, yeah, again, be creative. Maybe some of the smaller or mid-sized cities that students wouldn't have looked at before could have a lot of opportunity for them there. And judicial clerkships, of course, are not going away. You'll stand by. Next, someone said increasing interest among students in a variety of jobs outside of big law, including public interest, government practice, with the caveat that funding could be dicey. That's, again, very interesting fine line, right? So if we're going to be promoting right now, government seems to be hiring like crazy. We can't seem to have enough, time slots to put in all these info sessions. I don't know, what's going to happen though. We're on an election year. We don't know what's going to happen with budgets. Aside from the economy, the election year always brings some additional uncertainty. And then with public interest, what happens with this funding? Right now, it's okay, budgets have already been set, but what's going to happen in the near future with changes in the economy? How is that going to affect potential fellowship funding? So does anyone want to have anything to talk about that before we move on to OCI logistics?
This is George Podolin from William and Mary. I guess I wanted to remark that hello, and thank you so much for doing this. I guess my observation, especially with the public interest in government piece, is that one of the nice things that we've all gotten used to with big firm recruiting happening in July and August is that if we have students who are on the margin, might not get a position there, we tell them, hey, give it your shot. And if you don't make it, that's okay. We'll know by October. You can go to plan B, no problem.
Yes.
Now it seems like it's all going to be happening within about the same 3 or 4 week period. And I anticipate some challenges in working with students who aren't sure whether they should, take an unpaid but attractive, government or public interest position, or hang on for a big law. And I think that's one of the reasons that we are encouraging our students to apply to any firms they're interested in. If they open up the portals in the fall, maybe they'll get some market education about whether, they're likely to actually get any traction, or whether they're just going to get no response, or a response that says, hey, update us when you get your new grades. But I think that is certainly something, I certainly have no solutions to that except to try to educate the students early about that challenge. I don't think we're quite at that point in the semester where we can hit them with that yet, but I think that's going to be a reality that is going to be interesting to face.
You're right, George. Right, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because we've got so many of these students, not just 2Ls, but also looking at potentially 3Ls, right? Also trying to apply to government positions at this time. Do I wait? Maybe a small mid-sized firm would be another option for them. That they would be interviewing for in the spring. So this is going to be super tricky. And although at least with government, how long it takes to do those checks, the background checks. So maybe you'll have some interviewing going on before those checks even come back. So that might be a little bit of a saving grace, but they do need to apply. They can't just be waiting, which is, I know just exactly what you're saying right now is normally they would maybe not even be thinking about, wouldn't even apply, but now we're going to need to get them to apply. So if anyone has any ideas how to do that, please share them. You can send them to us later too. All right, Jackie, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Next.
So we're just going to go through, we got 5 minutes. I'm going to try to get through some of the OCI logistics that we've heard, as well as questions we have for you. And you're welcome to share these in the chat if that's easiest. And then we'll send out the information after the end of this session. But we're curious to know, during Spring OCI, will all 3 classes interview together at the same time at your institution? Or will 2Ls and 3Ls interview during the first week or 2 of OCI, followed by 1Ls, or vice versa? I think that this is a big question for a lot of schools. I know it is for us. We're still trying to decide how to do that. Tiffany, if you're still here, can you speak as to how you did that during fall OCI? Did everybody interview together? I know you're probably still in the thick of it. Is she still?
There we go. Yep.
Right.
And for our biggest OCI session 1 that happened in August, that is only 2Ls and 3Ls and LLMs for our Master's in Laws program. The 1Ls, you know, they haven't come to campus yet, you know, school hasn't started yet. So that's typically how it is. Normally OCI 2 will be open to upperclassmen as well. And then OCI 3 for the last number of years has been solely for 1Ls, and we'll just be adding opportunities for 2Ls and 3Ls at the same time. So normally we would have a full week for OCI session 1, 1 day for session 2 that we normally hold in October, and then session 3 would only be 1 day, but this year it'll be 4 days in January. And we got so much feedback from some of our employers who would normally come and recruit for session 1 that they'd rather recruit in January when students have more grades, and yay, definitely on board with that. So we basically created a system whereby anyone who wants to come and hire our students definitely can come. So we'll have a mixture in the spring.
That's awesome. Does anybody else want to speak to this? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try to collect this feedback, and then we'll get more information out to you if there are schools who want to share what their plans are. Really quickly, I know a lot of people are interested in the platforms that other schools are using, and I believe that Angelica and Pascal are going to talk about this in one of their later sessions, what platforms schools are using. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and just leave that to them, and then we'll also get a poll for schools to be able to say, here's what we're doing, here are the systems we're using, and then we'll send out that information as well. I think, you know, an hour is just not enough time to go through all of this. And
yes, I definitely see the next session as an extension of this one. And we had a lot of good responses, a lot of variation on what people are doing, and yet there were some clusters of people doing some of the same things. So that'll be cool.
The last question that we asked was, how is your CSO working to ensure that students with disabilities or with unique needs are not left behind in a virtual OCI landscape? And some of the things that schools said were that they were reviewing Zoom accessibility features, as well as accessibility features with the platform services that they're planning to use outside of Zoom. And so I know a lot of schools are actively having those conversations, and we would encourage you to do that if you haven't quite thought about that. Also taking advice from the AD of Disability and Student Services, working with them to ensure that we understand our students' needs and making sure that those are met. Reviewing and modifying our policies around accommodation, so making sure that all the programming has closed captioning and maybe chat fields, transcripts, and then a lot of them have a university-wide accessibility services office, and so that was something that we had heard a lot about from registrants. Is there anybody who want to kind of share anything additionally to that as far as what you're doing to make sure that all students' needs are being met in the case of virtual interviewing? No? Okay.
We got a lot of great responses. So when we send that out to everyone, I think you'll get some really excellent information. Thank you to everyone for sharing.
And really quickly, because we're going to we're moving to the main session in about 50 seconds. So if you had additional questions about anything related to virtual interviewing or OCI, please either email me or with those questions, and then also if you want to put them in the chat field, that's great too. We just want to make sure that if there were specific topics that you guys wanted to talk about that we just didn't get to today, and I'm very sorry, this should be a 2-hour thing, I think. Let me know. We'll gather those responses and then kick them out. We can continue to have this conversation over Now Connect or over email, however you guys want to do it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Do we think we should start sharing, Heather?
Yeah, I mean, how to capture an hour of really great ideas in the 7 minutes that I have to share with the large group. That's tricky.
Right? Yeah. And
You
then let
can do
people.
it, Heather.
Yeah.
Talk fast, talk fast.
I'm jumping right in. Okay, so the first thing we did was we talked about our group was talking about programming and creating quality programming for students that is either recorded or even synchronous. We started with a list of suggested kinds of recordings, everything from a 2-minute top 10 kind of a list to the ever popular voiceover, a PowerPoint. There's, skits, there's video blogs, as well as, I don't know, we had 8 or 9 things. Then we had a really great suggestion from USC. They are using something called Powtoons, which are those little animated, like little stick figures doing things, kind of recordings. And apparently Powtoons has some, I'm not sure if it was free or low cost options without getting into a really big package where it will produce these kind of animated presentations. So that was a really neat one that a lot of us hadn't heard of before. And it was mentioned that some of those cool ideas were featured at one of the NACE events. NACE is like a NELP counterpart that a lot of times undergraduate career services professionals will belong to. So that is another great place to check out for resources. I know NELP is in the process of trying to create a better relationship between those two organizations. We had some discussion about e-newsletters, some of the different formats that people are using, Publisher, MailChimp, and something called My Emma, which one of our participants really liked because it had great tracking and analytics capabilities. We talked about whether or not schools are requiring students to watch the programming or participate in the programming. And for those that are, how are they tracking that? We had everything from people using platforms that give specific data on who watched to schools that are having students take accountability for watching the required programs and then either signing or attesting to the fact that they did complete the assignment. Some folks are using Blackboard and actually assigning them like professors assign assignments. Let's see. Then we talked about the security issues. Are people password protecting their presentations or are they not? We had a split. A lot of folks are putting things on Simplicity, which would be password protected. Other schools, because they spend the time to brand the presentations, actually think of it as maybe a good recruitment and PR type tool, so they're not password protecting. We did mention that you should be careful if you're doing any kind of programming that includes passwords for resources such as Arizona handbooks or Vermont law, state judicial clerkship guides, that you wouldn't want to have anything be not password protected since you're giving login information. And that is a subscription-based resource. Let's see, we
also had a really good discussion about DE&I programming.
Yep, then we drifted to a great discussion on DE&I. Yeah,
and that a number of schools are either incorporating it into other required programming or having separate sessions on that. So that seemed to be a pretty universal thing that was done. And I want to call out, Eric Bono mentioned that there's 3 law schools that have come together around the Colorado Pledge to Diversity. And he dropped a link to that into our chat, and I'll include that as a part of a debrief document I'll send out to everyone. But that's an interesting program that involves firms actually committing to hiring diverse candidates as 1Ls, which I think is a really compelling idea in a format for doing that. So I thought that was interesting. And then also that people are, go ahead.
Sorry, I said that's really neat. I want to know more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was exciting. Are we, I think we're supposed to hand over the baton now to the other session.
I wanted to make one more mention before we hand over the baton. We did have one of the participants mention that they have talked in a CSO community about pledging not to do any panel or program that doesn't include diverse panelists, and actually saying if we can't bring a diversity of viewpoints, then apparently we don't have the resources to work on that program. So they're taking a really hard, really, affirmative stand about including diverse viewpoints in all of their programming.
Yeah, it's true. I thought that was an amazing commitment to make. All right, so the other session, you guys want to jump in?
Yep, absolutely. So our session focused on best practices related to OCI, specifically how to run a successful program during a pandemic. We specifically focused on what people are doing for spring recruiting, because I think the vast majority of schools are going to do spring recruiting in lieu of the fall session. But we followed up on questions that we had asked our registrants when one of the questions was how are CSOs working with employers to ensure their needs are met. And so we spent some time talking about, schools are allowing employers to post jobs outside of fall recruiting, especially government, public interest, and military recruiting. Some are allowing employers to post resume collections. And several schools are doing a virtual spotlight on employers on a regular basis throughout the fall, so that students can utilize that time better to get to know local organizations. We also asked how the CSOs are planning to mitigate potentially reduced turnout during spring OCI. Some of those responses that we got from schools and in the chat was that they're working with internal and community partners to create opportunities for legal experience. They're encouraging students to apply broadly and think outside the box. Some of the schools, I'm sure many of the schools called employers over the summer to stay in touch with them, especially those who regularly hire students and graduates, and some of the ways that they did reach out to employers. We also had schools talk about encouraging the alumni to hire students and encouraging more one-on-one counseling with students and encouraging various hot topics or hot practice areas with the students in those one-on-one counseling sessions. We were asking schools how CSOs are being transparent with students about the impact of COVID on the legal market. That was where a lot of the responses as far as we're counseling students on hot practice areas and employment opportunities, including bankruptcy, healthcare, litigation, JD Advantage positions, small firm opportunities, rural opportunities, and judicial clerkships, and also encouraging students to apply for a variety of jobs outside of big law, especially public interest and government practice, also noting that funding could be a little dicey in the future due to budget cuts. Really quickly, we didn't have a ton of time to delve into timing and platform. I know that Angelica and Pascal are going to talk about platforms more in their next session, so that we kind of skipped over that a little bit, even though I know that that's an important topic to a lot of people. We also talked about, how schools are going to be administering OCI in the spring. Will the 3 classes interview together at the same time? Or will 2Ls and 3Ls interview first and then they're followed by the 1Ls? That was something we didn't have a chance to get into as much as we wanted due to time, but we will be discussing this more. We'll put together a report on this and put it into NELP Connect so that we can continue to have a conversation about this. The last question that was asked in our registration was, how is your CSO working to ensure that students with unique needs are not left behind in a virtual OCI landscape? Some of those responses included reviewing Zoom accessibility features, discussing accessibility features directly with the platform services that they plan to use, and taking advice and consulting with the AD of Disability and Student Services at their school. reviewing and modifying policies around accommodation and working closely with the Accessibility Services Office. So unfortunately, we ran out of time, which is the bane of all of our existence. And I think when we have these conference sessions, they really should probably be 2 hours or 3. But we'll continue to, there were a lot of questions in the Zoom group chat, some interesting questions that we will also address that we didn't get to in our session, and continue that discussion on NELP Connect. And
that was a lot. I just want to say shout out to Tiffany Tucker from U of H for sharing. They actually did have a virtual August OCI and had a lot of success. So that's encouraging that employers are still out there trying to hire our students. And I thought that was just absolutely fabulous. Thank you, Tiffany, for sharing all that you did there. And it sounds like you'll be more than willing to answer any questions. I don't want to inundate you, but we will, we just want to say thank you for sharing.
My pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
Tiffany's suddenly going to become the most popular person at NELP. You're going to regret this weekend. You're going to have like 500 emails, man.
Not at all. Let me just tell you why. Because Courtney James, she wasn't able to be here. Unfortunately, she sends her regrets because she was planning on it. She is the mastermind behind all this. Right. People ask me what I do. I said, I just get out of the way and let my team do what they do best. And she's been amazing. That team managed everything. The rest of us were sitting at home, not twiddling our thumbs. We're doing all the things that we're all doing remotely, but they managed everything, 300 plus interviews over the course of a week. So I owe it all to them. They figured it out. So email Courtney. You can email me too. I'll just forward you to Courtney.
Right. There you go. Poor Courtney. That'll teach you for not showing up.
Exactly.
So we're about to go to the bio break. We're going to restart at 9:25, but try and be here at least 2 or 3 minutes early so that they can book you into the rooms, right? Because we got to go through that same process. So and that'll help, and people are going to get started pretty quick on time because obviously the topics are deep. Thanks everyone for participating in the first session. I thought it went really, really well in our group. It sounds like the other group went really, really well. And like I said, as we start to compile stuff, we'll gather together our notes from this, stuff from the chat, and try and send that out to everyone in something that's a somewhat comprehensible document, because there's a lot of good comments and ideas. We heard a lot of technology that was brought up in our session that we hadn't heard of in other areas, and so that'll be interesting to share with other people as well. I think with that, unless anyone has a question, and I'm going to stay in the room, but now it's time for a bio break, so you can hang out here, go get a glass of water, go visit the loo, do what you do.
So I don't want to waste any time. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about. In fact, so much to talk about that we have sort of an interesting format for today's program. We're going to talk live primarily about what I think of as the traditional big format program, where you have everybody in one large room, maybe some low tables, maybe some high boys, a couple of representatives from each employer, and then all of your students crammed in trying to talk to all of those employers. We also realize that obviously there are programs that are large format for us behind the scenes, but that are maybe more interpersonal from the student's point of view. So this would include mock interview programs, but also if you've ever done speed dating or something that might be mock informational interviews. We've tried a lot of those different things at Northwestern. It takes a lot of planning and some different platform considerations, but a different experience for the students. Those interpersonal type large scale programs we're going to address in the chat. So keep an eye on the chat, keep that box open if you can, and please participate there, as well as add any live information that you might want to share. So for those of you who do not know me, I'm Pascal Bishop. I'm the Director of Career Strategy at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law. I've been at Northwestern almost 8 years now, which is strange and kind of funny. It's the longest place I've stayed since I graduated from law school. Prior to that, I kind of seem to switch every 2 to 3 years. So Northwestern's my 4th school. Before that, I was at John Marshall Law School in Chicago, Chicago-Kent College of Law. And then I took a little boondoggle down to the University of Florida Levin College of Law for a couple years before moving back to the Chicago area. And then I'm going to turn it over to Angelica to introduce herself.
Hi there. Hello, everyone. My apologies if you were in my last session. You get more of me. So I'm the Associate Director at the University of Texas School of Law. I've been here since 2008, so I've seen a lot of downs and ups, and now let's see where we're going next. I was a practicing attorney for a good while in a bunch of different areas, government, regulatory, in-house. I had my own practice when I first started out, so criminal, family law, healthcare, behavioral health. I've got all that experience, which I've now promptly forgotten most of it since I've been here since 2008. So, and at any rate, I just am excited to be here today, and I look forward to having a very interactive conversation. This is not about us just talking, but about us collaborating, because we have a lot to do this semester, this year, and it's difficult trying to figure this out, right? So I'm glad that we have each other to lean on and to, you know, collaborate and figure out what the best practices are, if we, you know, if there is one. And there are multiple approaches, obviously, to every problem, but I think if we can share some of the things that are working for us, that would be really great. So with that said, let's get going.
All right. So I am going to attempt to share my screen with the idea that, oh, that's not the one I wanted you all to see. Let me see if I can get there.
Oh, that's good.
Raise your hand if you are doing a hybrid program, because I think that's going to be a smaller number, as opposed to doing everything virtually for the fall semester.
And by that, Pascal, we're meaning not that we're doing, we're talking about our programming, right? And it being
sorry, to be clear,
not the school.
Right, not your classrooms, but the programs that your office specifically is doing. If you are doing some live programming for your students this year, please go ahead and raise your hand in the box.
And I'm trying to remember how to raise my hand. Oh, come on. Oh, I got it.
Awesome. All right, it does look like a pretty small number. Most people seem to be doing virtual programming this year. Did anyone who raised their hand, is anyone willing to share to what extent you're doing live programming and what type?
I'd be happy to share. My name is Jennifer. I'm at UMKC in Kansas City School of Law. Our students, we polled our students prior to the start of school, and the majority said that they would like to have some programming. And so what we did was, we are still doing quite a bit of virtual programming, but we're having 2 sessions this semester where we have 2 guests come in, and it will all be spaced. It will be in our largest courtroom, so everyone will be separated, and then we'll have 2 presenters actually from a law firm. It's a program they've done at our school for a while, just on outlining and note-taking and preparing for exams. And that was one that students felt was important to have in person. So we're trying it with just a couple, and it's on a very limited group, only 2 presenters allowed in at a time. And then they have to sign up in order to join the group.
Fantastic, thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else want to share what your in-person programs are looking like?
I have a question. How many of you are planning to have live virtual events versus pre-recorded? So if am I getting ahead of myself, Pascal?
Not at all.
Okay, I'm like, okay, because I'm still trying to wrap my brain around all of this. So you have live in person, you're spaced out with your masks, hopefully, and then you have virtual programming that is pre-recorded. You've done your slides if you need it, whatever, your documents, you're talking, you got it recorded, it's on demand, they can see that anytime, watch that whenever they want. And then you have, okay, now I'm live, you're where you are, wherever in the world, and I'm here, and we're actually having an interactive conversation potentially. Or you're just listening to me and sending me some chat. So I guess maybe raise hands if you're doing any live programming. Can you tell how many of those are? I can't tell.
Let's see. Sorry if I seem to be looking down. I have 3 different screens going.
Story of my
like a fair number.
story of my life.
Hi, I'm from.
Hi, Nasleen.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
Does this, when you're saying live programming, do you mean virtual live programming?
Yes.
So far, South Texas College of Law Houston has only been doing live virtual programming, and we're recording it to send out. We are planning on doing some pre-recorded, but right now we're only doing live.
Awesome.
That's
Anyone else doing that? And I guess maybe, do you want to talk to any challenges? Like that might be one of them right there. You're doing a live program and you have other things that you have to deal with, including your kids or your pets.
He's doing his flashcards right now. So the challenge, I think, mostly has been because our school is doing more virtual classes. The timings have been very limited in where we can do live programs. So we're trying to find times that tend to work best. Some of that might be on a Friday, some of that might be in the evenings. So that's been one of the challenges. And just getting an audience can be a little bit of a challenge. I mean, we all are doing Zooms all the time. So imagine taking classes, these students are zoomed out for the most part.
Yes.
So that's the challenge. So we try to make it exciting. We're thinking about different ways to create some incentives for students to join. We've only had about 4 programs. 2 were under 10. That's more of things like check-ins that we do with our students where we're talking about, hey, how to succeed in OCI. Give me 1 second. How to succeed in OCI and how to, make yourself stand out in virtual interviews. Whereas where we had our JAG program and a couple of other practice panel programs, those were very well attended, more so than we would in person. So I think there's some advantages and disadvantages to both.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Oh, I see we have a ton of comments on the.
Yeah, we have a lot of great comments. Just to share a few, there's a plan to hold mock interviews with alums, but students will sign up for a time slot and then we'll use Zoom to do live, but not in person. Someone else mentioned the office is mulling over how to adjust their mentor program, and that might include live informational interviews. Another school mentioned that although they are doing virtual programming, it will all be live. And another school is doing a mix. So I think that we're kind of all over the map. I know Northwestern is trying out some asynchronous things where we're asking the 1Ls in particular to watch a short video of 10 to 15 minutes on a topic, and then we'll have small group discussion sections where they can ask questions about the material. And the hope there is that will alleviate a lot of the one-on-one counseling pressures from the 1Ls come October, when we know our 2Ls are going to also be really wanting our attention. So I'm loving all the creativity that I'm seeing in the chat and hearing from our live participants, because I think this is a time to really stretch those creative muscles for those of us who have that itch, because there's so many different ways to do this.
Sorry,
Hey, Betsy.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. One thing that we're doing too, and maybe you guys knew this, but I didn't until recently, is that for example, we do a kickoff 1L orientation, and we also, at that time when we did it in person, we would gather information about like geography preferences, and we want to know that they've attended, right? So we are going to do that live via Zoom, but we're doing it in webinar mode, because with webinar mode, different than like I think what this session is being done today, you can also, people have to RSVP, but then you can also track that they're there, and you can also download a spreadsheet both for attendance, but also if you ask questions like we want to, this geography preference thing, it will also populate their responses to their geographic preferences into the Excel spreadsheet. So it serves as sort of a proxy of attendance taking, but also information gathering. And then of course we'll also pre-record it, and then the principal, that is I, we'll track down the 1Ls who didn't show and say, you've got to watch and you have to answer these, this questionnaire about geographic preferences because you missed the session. But we usually find that the 1Ls are motivated to attend these things, so we're hopeful And we luckily do have one like 50-minute block when they don't have classes. So that's when we're going to hold it, and we're going to see how it goes. I'll let you know, but that's at least the plan.
Thank you, Betsy. That is awesome. So that questionnaire with the geographic preferences, is that a poll or is it like a built-in survey?
I'm saying it. I think it's a poll. I think it's a poll. We haven't done it
That's
yet,
neat.
but yeah.
Fantastic.
To do it that way. I like that.
I hate to cut this off because I feel like it's going really well, but we have a couple more topics. And if you do have other things you want to share on this topic, please put it in the chat, and we'll, again, that'll be part of the package that you'll get as participants in this conversation. I'm going to let Angelica lead the next discussion, but we do have a poll. Charlie, do you mind throwing up the poll that we have, the first poll?
So it'll take just a second, I think, for you guys to take the poll, but it'll be worth it. We'll get some great answers. I promise.
Very, time-tested poll. I'm sure it'll be the most valuable thing you take away today.
I'm seeing a QR code, but not a poll. Is the poll up?
I think Charlie's getting it ready for us. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
Sorry, Charlie.
So we want to know what programming looks like for you guys. If you're even done planning it, it's a work in progress for us.
Mm-hmm. We keep shifting.
Shifting, yes. We think we're going to do something one way, and then back to what we were just talking about. I think we are planning on doing a lot of how-tos. Our how-tos for our 1Ls will be pre-recorded, but then we will have some live Q&A sessions. Mm-hmm. So that kind of like what you all are doing, Pascal. So make sure that they do get it. If they have any questions, they can come to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're trying to indicate that although we obviously know everyone's different, there are also a lot of common questions that you don't necessarily need to come in for 30 minutes to talk to us about.
That's what I've been saying for years. It's like, how can we streamline this process?
I keep saying if there's a silver lining to COVID, it's the fact that it's pushing things that I've always wanted, but never really had the ability to say, like, we need to do this, including asynchronous and small groups and all that kind of stuff. Thank you to everybody who's answering. It looks like with about half the group participating, we're holding more programs, which goes very well with our theme of Zoom fatigue. And it's very real, not just for our students, but for us.
I think this is going to be great to keep track of, throughout. Let's see how it's going throughout the semester, throughout the year, and make sure that we are getting the pulse of our students. Like, are they actually watching these? Again, with the Zoom fatigue, I'm tired after 2 hours of being on here. I can't imagine sitting through very intensive law school courses all day long doing this. Like,
Just talked to a student who was auditing secured transactions to determine if this was the semester he wanted to take it. And I was like, wait. I don't want to think about secured transactions for 2 hours in a Zoom setting.
No, it's a different kind of tired, right? I don't know the science behind it, but it's definitely real. And
all right, Charlie, if you can keep an eye on that for us, but I think we're going to switch back to the slideshow at this point. And the question here is not only are you increasing the number of programs, but are you also increasing the types of programs that you're having? Are you refocusing your fall programming on OCI preparations and or more 2L related programming? I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. So does anyone want to share what that more programming means to you?
How do I write?
I know for us, it's moving a lot of things we have traditionally done in the springtime to fall while still keeping our fall programming. We're actually worried about, if you can imagine, not having enough programming in the springtime because we have much overlap this semester. So we have started to think about what can we provide in the spring that will be of interest and topical. Anyone else having similar concerns or thoughts?
Pascal, this is Jen Henpe from Villanova. We're doing a lot of the same, and we also spent a lot of time in the early summer doing some programming for the 2020s because we felt like they had this gap. So we really changed the nature of our summer in a way that like we couldn't do all of that catch up stuff at the same time shifting all of the spring stuff to the fall. It felt very hectic. But we're also increasing programming really across the board to the 2Ls and the 3Ls and very soon the 1Ls. So it's just, we feel like there's so much more to share with them, although at some points what we're sharing is so that we don't know yet, right? But we feel like because they can't just pop their head in, you know, we're working remotely, we wanna have more where we're pushing out to them. And all of our programming is live virtual. So we just wanna be there for them. So we'll see what happens with attendance. Some of our stuff is mandatory, so that's good. But some of the other stuff we're doing, you know, who knows what that's gonna look like. But we will record and it's available.
And we are going to bring that up in a few minutes. This sort of like, how do you lure them in a situation where you cannot provide them with the pizza or bag or something else. Thanks for sharing that, Jen. That's great. Anyone else?
How big is your class, Jen? Out of curiosity.
You're on fatigue. Zoom fatigue. We have it's like close to 181 else. So it's not huge.
But not small.
Yeah.
Interesting.
This is Tammy King from Washburn. And so one of the problems that I'm running in with live programming for students is traditionally we've had a great lunch hour. Last year we had like an hour and 45-minute break.
Wow.
And so that was a fantastic opportunity to bring in panels that could go an hour or whatever. But because of social distancing, most of our 1L classes are actually taking place in other buildings. And so we had to completely redo our schedule to allow more time between classes, which has taken away from the lunch hour. And so realistically, we have like 35 minutes available over lunch. So it's just a struggle to kind of figure out, like, it's hard to do something live during that time period. And so a lot of my live stuff that I'm doing, especially for the 1Ls, God help me, I'm moving to late afternoon and I hope it works out. And then the other types of things are going to be more of the short pre-recorded videos that will be sent out.
Wow,
So Tammy, sorry, Tammy, are all of your classes on 1L, 2L, 3Ls, they're all on campus?
We're doing a hybrid approach. So the 1L classes are all being offered live, but also with Zoom backup. So some students are taking them exclusively on Zoom. Some of our 2L and 3L classes are exclusively on Zoom, but some of them are live with the Zoom option.
Thank you.
And I'm guessing, is there anyone who, I'm guessing everyone is recording everything because we know that there'll be a lot of people who have conflicts no matter how hard we try. I actually did an LSAT style problem the other day, trying to find out times to do these small group sessions by finding out which subsections have CLR at which times to carve out 8 different 30-minute sections when students might be available. And I think I got rid of it, but I literally had a grid.
Oh my God.
Like Monday through Friday, 4A is here, 2B is here. It's just a nightmare. I feel like not having a guaranteed time.
I think that's why we're choosing to mostly go with the pre-recorded with add on some Q&As, because when you start, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that problem. I couldn't solve it. It was like there's no good time. So yeah, I understand. This is real. They're somewhere online all day long, and then we're trying to fit in this other thing. So to that end, does anyone have an idea or best practice of what the length, what's a great length of the program? Whatever the program may be, what do you all think is a best practice on that?
This is Meredith Wiggins at University of Kansas School of Law. Some research I encountered earlier this summer said that sort of 20 to 25 minutes is maybe the upper limit that you can really expect students to engage. So I'm hopeful that on our end, that will mean prioritizing getting the content hopefully in 15-ish minutes, and then if we're including a synchronous component, leaving that time for sort of Q&A and engagement. But that is certainly a big difference than the length of time that we've taken in the past, right? Yeah, where it's 45 minutes of talking followed by 15 minutes of Q&A.
I like that though. Back to what Pascal was saying, maybe this will carry over into our live programming once, you know, we're all able to go back in person, and it's like, instead of, it won't even be seen as speed programming because it'll be the normal speed that we need, the right speed.
I'm curious, was there any indication in that research about if it should be 25 minutes and then ending, or 25 minutes and then changing the format or changing the method? The only reason I'm asking is we're considering a litigation versus transactional program where the first 20 minutes sort of comparing myths about both practices, and then going to breakout rooms where students could ask questions for another 20 minutes and then swap the breakout rooms. So
I do not remember off the top of my head. I can try to look that up and share it with the group.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
I'll make a note to see if I can find that again.
Thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Cool. Anything else on the increase in programming or the changes in the kinds of programming that people are offering this fall?
I can share. This is Jessie Bergman at Mitchell Hamlin. We are not increasing programming necessarily, but I thought I'd share on the last piece the how long our programs have been. So I had a colleague work on an awesome series this summer of asynchronous programming. We called it our Nuts and Bolts series, and her goal was to create really short videos, like 6 to 7 minutes, on what people have been talking about, those like frequently asked questions, especially for our 1Ls. And our thought was that, you know, because of the Zoom fatigue, that the 6-minute video is something a lot more digestible. And, you know, I've had a few eager 1Ls trying to work on resumes already. And when I suggest they watch this short video, it feels less daunting to send to them than a, you know, an hour-long presentation on resumes or something like that.
I know I'd be more likely to watch it right then and there.
Exactly. Yeah, we thought it was something too that, you know, if they wanted to listen to it while they went for a walk, or if they don't necessarily have to watch it either, that they could, you know, it's something they could do between classes or just something really digestible.
That sounds fantastic.
Hi everyone, it's Sandra from the University of Washington School of Law. I wholeheartedly endorse the like 6-7 minute videos. One thing I've noticed in my time working in career services, especially over the last couple of years, is we just are not seeing the turnout that we used to see in our lunch sessions. And so last year we decided to take a different approach to resume and cover letter advising and programming, and created snackable videos with a whole web page devoted to the different application materials and the short videos to accompany each, to talk about formatting and the basics. And while we don't really have a good way to track analytics, when we do finally do the review, the work product is so much better than it used to be. And so wholeheartedly endorse.
Excellent. Thank you, Sandra. I love it. Snackable.
Anything that is going to take less time on track changing people's resumes, I am all for. So that sounds great.
Wonderful suggestion. Thank you.
All right, with that, I'm going to move it on to the next topic, but please, again, continue to use the chat to add additional thoughts or questions.
All right. How are we doing on time, Pascal?
We have about 18 or so minutes left, I think.
Cool.
Platforms, as promised, we're going to talk a little bit about platforms, everyone. And obviously, there's some overlap, I think, for most of us with regard to what we're using for on-campus interviewing, as well as these large format programs. So, Angelica, do you want to talk a little bit about the responses that we got?
Yeah, let me just mention some of the, I'm going to throw out some of the names here, and I was like pleasantly surprised. There was a lot of this. So of course we have Simplicity, 1220, Zoom, but then we had things like Blackboard Collaborate, Calendly, Kaltura, I don't even know how you say it, YouTube, Instagram, Google Hangouts, InternX, of course, Microsoft Teams, Rally, Uconnect. And did I also mention, did I say Flow Recruit already? A lot of schools are looking into Flow Recruit and using them for their interview programs coming up. So is there anything else that people want to talk about? I think, it's hard. Like, are people using the same thing for as many things as possible or switching it up? I think it's so hard learning on different platforms. Brazen, I don't know if I said that one too. That's one that we're looking at as well. It's difficult for admin staff, and if you have a small staff too, to be able to learn all the different things there is to go into this. You have to onboard, figure out the process of bringing on employers, students, or can you upload the whole thing at once, all of the data at once or not? So it's a huge challenge. I think back to, like Pascal started this off, like the buzzing room with all of the chatter. Like, isn't that awesome? Like when you walk into a room, you've put together this program and the students and employers, they're talking and learning, and the energy in the room is just like, wow. Like, you're like, this is why we do this. This is what it's all about. How are we going to try to get some semblance of that in this virtual world? So I think this is, I am open to suggestions. Anyone that wants to tell us what you're doing to make this as great as it can be, I want to hear it.
And we realize that a lot of us haven't done these big format programs yet, but has anyone seen something that was used maybe by admissions or student services for orientation that looked good? So we're among the schools that is probably going to use Flow Recruit for both our OCI and our Meet the Employers Night, as well as potentially other programs like our mock interview program. And it just seemed easier for us to use one platform for everything, although we had considered for a while getting Flow Recruit or something similar just for OCI and having a slightly different product that more mimics the more traditional style of everybody moving from table to table, but we couldn't find one that seemed like it didn't have some glitch or something that was going to cause problems. And I think there's also that benefit that I mentioned of everybody having one additional system. Our students are already confused by the fact we have Simplicity and then our blog space resource center. Throwing 2 additional softwares at them felt like a lot. Anyone have any different feelings about that?
I'll chime in.
Sandra.
Sandra again, hi. So we tried really hard to just stick to one platform, and the reality is none of them gives us everything we need. And so one of the things that our city group, Salra, is doing is we're actually looking at a product called Remo, I think is what it's called, to host some speed networking events. And then the law school is actually also looking at that product, as well as some others, for career fairs. And so we think that even though it's slightly more disruptive than being able to have it all integrated in one system, if we have to create other workflows to be able to make an existing system work for what we need, is it really worth the extra trouble? So we are just going to try to streamline whatever links and processes have to be used in a separate system and integrate those into our existing systems as best we can. But I'm really excited. I've done one of the demos for this product, and I also attended several of the NALP demos. And I just think that even though there is a downside, the upside outweighs it.
Fantastic, thank you.
I'll chime in. This is Betsy at USC. We are thinking of using, we are looking at Flow Recruit maybe for the interviews, and I think it's a good product. But what I didn't love about their networking platform is that it's limited in terms of numbers of people or scale, if you will. So I think for like our Meet the Firm event, which we normally would have done, a huge table talk with 50 firms, I think we're going to use just the Simplicity's career fair module. Because it actually seems that allows one-on-one chats, which you can just, queue up and do it. You don't have to pre-schedule. And then, but they also can, like a recruiter can be in a room and students, like a big group can be talking to a recruiter. So multiple students can be in one room for the same firm, but then also there can be this one-on-one video chat happening. So if you haven't looked at that, I think it's actually it looks good. We haven't used it, so I don't know what the heck I'm even talking about, but we're going to probably do a bifurcated thing. It's not all going to be on one platform, I don't think.
I like that has the advantage that students are already familiar with Simplicity and won't have to have another login or additional link for that. It's now.
I mean, they're pretty good, you know, better, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I don't know if 1220 has for those on the 1220 platform, whether it has a similar component with the job fair module. I don't know if they do that or not. So if anybody wants to speak to that. I do see that someone is asking about pricing. Yeah, a lot of these things are not cheap. If you are a Simplicity user, then it is included in your system. The problem with Simplicity and the scheduled interview portion is that you either have to use the firms or organizations link, or like U of H spoke to earlier, you have to use your own Zoom. And then that just means that you're moderating everything, and I think it might be a little bit more difficult. So I think that the back end, that's what you have to think about, depending on how many interviews you're doing, right? If you're doing 200, that may be manageable. If you're doing 3,000 or 4,000, that might not be as manageable.
And one thing as a little thought that we were talking about as a team is in messaging to employers, letting them know that if your OCI fees are not reduced, despite the virtual world we're in and the fact you're not providing, say, a lunch for them, is that the platforms are expensive and that you can't afford a reduction if we're going to provide a smooth process for them.
Excellent point. Although I think some schools don't charge for their OCI, so then you're in the same boat, right? Makes it more challenging. Excellent.
All right, we have, I think, about 15, well, I was wrong before because I think we go to 12:15, so I think we do have 15 more minutes, and I'm going to move us along. We have one more poll. Charlie, if you don't mind throwing that up. And sorry for the confusion before. You do have to go to the website, the Slido website, and then enter the code that you can see below. And please go ahead and enter in terms of what you're seeing so far, in terms of are your usual employer panelists, speakers, etc., as interested, more interested now that they don't have to get in the cab or fly out to see you? Or are people just a little bit more nervous about taking time away? I'm going to give it just another minute to see if a few more people want to respond. We're at about a third right now. All right. The good news is it seems like a lot of employers still want to participate, which hopefully means they also will have opportunities to hire. Otherwise, why come out and take the time? But it seems that there also are some strong components where participation's either gone up or down. I think I've heard more from employers who definitely want to do things that we offer for free, which makes sense because we're all under cost crunches. But some of the things that we have had sponsorship for in the past have been passed on by prior years' sponsors. And we're hearing the same from our student organizations, either that employers are giving a smaller donation this year or maybe declining to sponsor this year, particularly given the smaller in-person interactions that they might be benefiting from as a result of COVID. Does anyone who is in the bottom two categories want to share what the employer feedback has been as far as why they think they're getting more employer interest or less employer interest right now?
This is Meredith again from KU Law. I I think to the extent that we're getting more interest, it's mostly just firms wanting to make sure that they remain on our radar and on our students' radar, because they're not in the building for OCIs, they're not seeing their former interns, and they're concerned that they will lose some of that mental space that they have with students. So I don't know that we're seeing more in terms of sponsorship, but we're definitely seeing more employers reaching out and saying, hey, what can we do? We want to make sure we're still getting to know your students even when we're not physically able to see them right now.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Maybe someone on the side of seeing less? Anyone seeing a change in the geographic range of employers who are willing to participate, since they can do everything from their desks now?
That's a good question.
In the past, Northwestern has done 2 mock interview programs, one in the fall of the 1L year. And for that, we've leaned very heavily into local attorneys, because we used to have it in our offices and do it as a real mimic of an on-campus interview. And then we would do mock callbacks in the summer where we would situate them wherever the students were for their summer jobs. But this year we're going to reach out to our summer mock interviewers to do them in the fall, because there's no reason in our minds that they couldn't be able to do 1 or 2 of these very easily from a Zoom platform. Anybody else kind of thinking the same?
Yeah, we've already launched our mock interview program. We do 2 a year. The winter one's usually just local, but the proxy of the run up to OCI one, that we've just launched it in the last couple of weeks, and we place students with alums all around the world, really. I mean, all around the country, but we have a few people in Korea, whatever. So we have alums doing them there, and we're having them all doing them virtually. We match them, and then it's up to the student, the alum, to actually schedule it. But it works great because it's giving them a, kind of a dry run for what a virtual interview is going to be like when they do it later in the winter.
I like that. That's cool, Betsy. So it's not like you have to do it within a certain time frame. It's like, here's the match, go figure it out on your own as far as the timeline and the format.
Yeah, we do. Well, full disclosure, we do give them a kind of a timeline, but it's a pretty big window. Like, do it over the next, by September, end of September. We want them to kind of be ready, but have an end date too.
Excellent. And then did they report back to you that it was done, or do you?
Honestly, no, but we hear if it doesn't happen, if they haven't been able to connect, and we make that really clear to both the students and the alums if they're having issues to come back to us. And it's kind of no news is good news, but believe me, if it wasn't happening, we'd hear it. So,
okay. Yeah. Very nice. All right, looks like we have about 9 more minutes.
So I don't know about anyone else's schools. We actually have had a huge debate with the student orgs in particular about how can they provide food to a dispersed student body in order to encourage them to come to the organization's programs. We are not trying to provide Uber Eats for every student that we want to come to a career strategy program. So the question is, do we expect the same level of participation? And if so, how? Are we hoping that by making the program shorter, by making them snackable, they're more likely to show up? Are we leaning into the fact that just all the students have a high anxiety about jobs right now and expecting them to show up because of that? I'm curious what inducements or enticements or sticks or carrots people are using to get the students to log in.
So I think we've heard some people saying they require some participation, right? So it's mandatory.
Mm-hmm. Which is probably the easiest, although I know but senior leadership buy-in can be hard on.
That's exactly right. You've got to have that senior leader buy-in, or else it has no teeth to it. And why even say it? Because then the next time they're going to say, well, nothing happened. In our case, we've been able to, over the last few years, been able to get that buy-in for certain things like mandatory counseling sessions. So we haven't made that so much for like CSO orientation or anything like that, but at least we have it for our one-on-one required meetings with 1Ls and 2Ls, and then the 3L exit with our obviously 3Ls graduating. So if they don't comply, then they get an advising bar on them. And so they can't register for classes, they can't do a whole lot of things, they can't get their financial aid, etc. So that's helpful. But we haven't taken it again down to that level of programming type. So if anyone else has any ideas, it's hard. It's hard, y'all. Food is a lure. Even if they've had that pizza 40 times in a semester, they still will come for the pizza. So
yeah, it's funny when I was complaining about this, the student orgs were demanding, Grubhub gift cards for everyone. To my husband, he sort of rolled his eyes and he's like, "How often do you go to programs where there's no food?" And I had to kind of laugh. And I always say, if the topic is important enough to me, I will go and brown bag it. But it's true that there have been times I've been on the fence and then seeing that the catering is coming from a place I particularly like, and that'll tip me in the direction of yes. Other thoughts? Things we've kicked around are passports where you get stamps for participating, and then you're entered into a raffle if you get a certain number of stamps in your passport. I think we've moved away from that because it'd be hard to keep track of who all's on, and not only on, but has their camera on and is actively listening. But we definitely would be open to creative thoughts. And again, if you want to, you can share these in the chat as well, is live if people are more comfortable with that.
I see someone talked about a larger range of alums from different states willing to participate in their Lunch and Learn series because they can do it remotely. I think that's absolutely one of the benefits of this, of being stuck on a virtual world, is that you can get people from all over the country, hopefully, to participate, and the world, if you can time it right. So yeah, that's a great thought, that where maybe as before you would think of only inviting your local practitioners to a certain event, now you can expand that, and wow, that's a great service to your students, right? Now they're getting to open their eyes for that. So put to new markets.
And Katie in the chat mentioned the Pathways feature in Simplicity. Has anyone in the program used Pathways at all? I know it's only about a year old.
Hi, this is Elisa O'Brien from the University of Akron. Actually started using Pathways this summer, and about 2 weeks later, Simplicity asked me to present on it. So I feel like I had to then become an expert. So,
awesome.
I've talked to some of our NALP colleagues individually about our use of it. It was actually really great. We basically implemented a lot of what you all are saying, having, bite-sized pre-recorded programs or resources. It's really nice because then the students can track their progress, but we can also track their progress. And so I just had written in the chat, we actually created Pathways this semester for each of our respective class years. And then we've told the students who complete their respective pathway by December, I think we put early December before exams, will be entered to win a gift card. So we'll see. But this summer we had about 40 students who participated, and I think half of them completed the full pathway. So it was just really helpful for us as well to see which resources they were gravitating towards, and then they could give us feedback or say, oh, it would really be helpful if we had, this type of resource. So I'd be happy to chat with anyone individually. I'm a big fan of it.
That is great. Do you put everything, all of your programming on there? Because that's something we struggled with. Like, do you then put it on your website? Do you put it on your YouTube page? Or do you, have you concentrated it solely on Pathways so that they're forced to go there?
No, so that's the one limitation, is our document libraries on Simplicity get to max capacity pretty quickly depending on how your videos upload. So we try to put the most current resources on Pathways and things that we want to be sort of behind closed doors. But we also have a pretty comprehensive YouTube page and web page where we kind of post the remainder. So really focusing on kind of more current things in Pathways for now until we can figure out if that has capacity for more space.
Elisa, I'm going to just put my notepad on for a minute and tell you that I'm going to probably email you after this and ask if you could do an article.
Oh, sure.
I think that would be so helpful, and a lot of people would really get a lot out of it. So it's something that, again, it's come up, and then we think we've got time to put it together, and then something happens. And so
yeah, happy to.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we've got just a few minutes before we do get thrown back into the larger session. I wanted to throw out the idea of workarounds. I sat in a session recently about using blog posts and articles written by you or pulled just from great websites that you trust as ways to get some of the same information out, maybe in a non-live or even non-asynchronous way. Does anyone come up with a great blog series, a fantastic resource for professionalism articles, or something that they want to share to still promote the same ideas that typically we would do in face-to-face programming? Oh, we have 58 seconds. Throw anything you got in the chat, everybody.
I think there were a few things in our in the responses to the registration. So we'll get all that out again. That'll all be out there, and I think some people had some really cool, innovative ideas on, again, how to engage and how to make sure that you're staying connected with your students.
All right. Well, since we're about to leave, I just want to thank everyone. We were talking offline a few minutes ago about how we really hoped we'd get a talkative group who would be sharing. And I don't think we could have asked for a better group of folks. You guys have been amazing in terms of sharing with each other. I think this is what NELP and our profession is all about, is helping each other come through hard times. And we're definitely in a hard time right now. So thank you.
And for me, the silver lining in this is we can be really intentional about creating a really inclusive culture, and giving more thought to that, and that intentionality with our programming and with all the choices that we make moving forward. I also think that a lot of the things that we're doing now might carry over to be cost effective and kind of on demand, convenient ways to do programming in the future. This will probably epically shift the way we do programming for years to come, even after the pandemic is, resolved.
To this intentional comment, that is one thing. We did have a fully remote 8-week program. So we had originally planned on 10 weeks. We cut it back because we pushed the start date back about 3 weeks, hoping that we would be in person. Didn't happen at all. We were all remote. And one of the things that we really looked to was structure, both from the individual interactions as well as the work. There were 3 things that I had a lot of concern about, and those were in reverse order of importance: making sure the students got really good work, making sure they got good feedback, and were asking for feedback, but most importantly, really this accessibility, this what are we missing when they can't go down the hall? How are they really getting to know what the firm culture is, what the expectations are, and how it would fit, how they would fit as an associate in the firm, and hopefully later a partner in the firm. So that last one, this whole accessibility, this structure, this communication was what was really concerning to me. And so one of the ways we approached that was we took the whole summer program, and similarly, as you all are looking at your training and your programming for the students, we sat down and looked at it and said, how can we either recreate that, or if we can't recreate it, just acknowledge that and say, how are we going to replace that with something else that's going to share with those students what's important to us and what is important to them, so that they can identify that. So we were really much more intentional about structure. And so that structure was communicating with the mentors, communicating with our ERGs to make sure they were reaching out to the summers. Our ally groups, our D&I group was very involved in making sure they were communicating with them. We had some unintentional or unexpected positives of this. There was a lot more other offices, for those offices that did not have summers, they were very much participating with our summer associate class, where they may not have done quite so much of that In years past, when the summers were on site in those offices, they were very focused on those offices. So that was a huge plus. And we heard from our summers, they really appreciated that. We set up an office connectors platform so that we were making sure that others in other offices, other practice areas were reaching out to the summers. Made sure our division leader and practice group leaders were connecting with them by Zoom very intentionally. So much as we were really structured about this, we did have to balance that fatigue versus are we telling them to do too much? Are we not giving enough guidance? We have never been a firm that said to a summer class, you figure it out, you sink or swim. That's kind of what's important for you as you move forward in your career. We have not been like that, but at the same time, there is some expectation that the summer kind of work through and figure out how to navigate both getting work and making the personal relationships. Well, we took a step back from that and said, we really need to give them not just permission to do that, but really guidance on how to do that and expectations that they do that. And then probably on the other side that was maybe harder was making sure that our lawyers were respecting that and embracing that same formatting. And so that was really what we came away with the summer, which I think could be brought to your schools, which is being much more, I don't want to say pushy, but intentional about expectations for the summers to do those things, to attend your programming, to set up meetings and how to do that. So that was our experience this summer.
That's wonderful, Linda. I feel like all of us on the school side are certainly learning from all of you on the employer side who've been through this on the culture side and the work and just those relationship building. I know with us, we are trying to be intentional also and trying to do some of that recreation of our culture. The nice thing is we all have our second and third year students who started to understand, if not fully understand, our culture. And so tapping into them to be mentors, as well as the faculty and the staff. So I know, one of the things our office, and I'm sure all your offices too, are frequently checking in with our students. But one of the things that the school did through our student affairs office in the late spring was they reached out to all staff and faculty and said, we want to make sure that every single student at this institution gets a check-in from somebody, a specialized one, not necessarily what's going on in your career, but just how are you as a human? And so everybody signed up for several students just to make sure that everybody knew that somebody in the institution cared about them on the faculty or the staff, and that worked really well. So I think we're, like everybody, rethinking our programming and trying to balance that Zoom fatigue versus the need to make sure that everybody's connected, and everybody's going to experience all of this very differently, and some will be impacted much harder. And so we want to be intentional about that as we go through and figure out our programming and everything else. So I think it's lots of challenges, but I do think, as Linda said, I think there's also some silver lining. I mean, I know we've talked about getting in touch with our alumni, and we've had a great response from alumni willing to be points of contact and mentor, and we're setting up some mentor circles with them. And some people who probably wouldn't have done it before, but now that we're virtual, they can do it from all over the country. And so there's definitely some silver linings that we're trying to take and expand upon those.
Nice. Thanks, Beth. So sort of thinking going forward, and if anyone wants to chime in, again, chime in at any time, just start speaking and we'll pause and call in. One of the questions we asked was the different platforms people were using. So I did a quick sort of review of that this morning based on the last drop-ins. Overwhelmingly, no surprise, right? Zoom, super popular. That a lot of people are trying to figure out how to leverage that forward. And then 1220 and Simplicity, which most, although not all law schools are using, but in some capacity for sort of doing this kind of outreach type work. The other one that came in with fairly good numbers was Flow Recruit, which we've started looking at as well, frankly. I ran through their demo last week. I've been in a lot of demos for a lot of software platforms the last 2 weeks. And I actually like their platform. I think I may do that because it allows me to do the OCI thing in a much simpler way, and then I get the benefit of some recruiting stuff. But the other thing we've been trying to think about, so from my end, and it's part of the reason that I want to talk about this topic, is how do you do the organic sort of interaction, which I think is fundamental to really good sort of networking and student connections with employers, with one another, with faculty, with everyone else. So not just the CDO, but across the school and then into the community writ large. And I have been struggling to figure out what's the best way to do that. We used to have a lot of events where we would invite students and they would sort of move around the room, right? A job fair of sorts. But invariably, I would always sit off in the wings, and if I saw a table was empty, I would grab students and usher them over to that table so that the employer wouldn't feel like they were getting ignored. But it would also get students to go to different tables, right? And I could manage that. That's harder to do in some of the platforms. Recently, my SBA, of all people, advocated for a platform that they wanted to use that I guess been used for the SBA National Conference. And so that was brought to me. I looked at that, talked to our student affairs people, and started, thinking about how that might work. It's called Remo. So that's one that I'll offer up that I'm pretty interested in and I may purchase. And Remo has this interesting format where it looks like a big conference room, with tables. And the attendees can jump from table to table to table to table at will. And the tables can have 4, 6, 8 people at them. And I think the tables can be branded to a firm, right? Or labeled as belong to a firm or an employer or a bar association. So other ideas for other people, how to get that sort of organic interaction, and maybe it's not possible. I don't know.
Arturo, after you mentioned Remo, I actually looked at it. There was a great online demo, and it gives you that full visual. It feels like a career fair. There's a table, you control how many chairs are at each one. You say which firm is at which table or which employer. So I really like that familiar kind of a visual of having the table effect. And the other nice thing about them, unlike some of the other companies, which you're never sure if you're paying the right amount, they have really upfront pricing. I will say about Flow Recruit, if you haven't already signed up and you're thinking about it, they can be really flexible and give really good deals to law schools because they make most of their monies from large firms. So they tended to be the most wishy-washy and willing to negotiate on costs.
So we'll thank Linda and her cohort for underwriting those costs, in essence, indirectly. So is anyone else using a different platform or thinking about a different platform to try and do that sort of interaction? Anyone?
This is Amy McCarthy from Georgia State College of Law in Atlanta. We just demoed a product this week called Gatherly. And it sounds like I had never heard of Remo, but it sounds like it's very similar. It has floors and elevators and tables, and you can organize it in all kinds of different ways. And it allows for that really organic movement. We typically host a big speed networking event, and we're looking at it for that event. And it looks like it may be a really great platform for that event. It's priced by event and per person. So, at least at first, attract to me that I don't have to make a long-term commitment to it. And I can figure out exactly what my cost will be for the one event. And then we can go from there. If we decide, they said that they may be offering subscription services going forward. But right now it's priced mostly by the event.
And I can speak to that as well. We're using Brazen. That sounds similar.
Nicole, will you tell us where you're from and who you are?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Nicole Simmons, University of Texas School of Law. We are using Brazen for that kind of tabling career fair feel. They are also priced by event and by person. And we were really attracted to the queuing features that they have to kind of keep the networking event flowing. And that was something that was really important for some of our networking events. For events where we can just kind of match people for one-on-one or small group conversations, and they're not going to be switching from, you know, virtual room to virtual room or table. We are using Flow Recruit. We will, I guess our subscription starts September 1st, and we are very excited about that platform as, you know, maybe a potential platform for virtual OCI. So we're going to use it for networking features in the fall, but you know, what they are able to do has really expanded since we first started talking to them in March. And so we are thrilled by that and want to see where that platform will go.
You mentioned the queuing setup in Brazen. Would you explain what's particularly appealing about that?
Yeah, so our concern was that for several of we have like a public service expo. It's typically a table talk, a tabling event physically in our law school. And one of the things that we were looking for in a platform was something to where a student could be in line for multiple tables at the same time. And so they might get into the room with the ACLU, but then also be in line with MALDEF, for example. And if you come to the front of the line and you're not there because you're in a chat with someone else, you don't lose your place in line. You kind of are, you know, get back at that point once you get out of the chat. So it was just something to keep things flowing. We didn't, if we could help it, we didn't want someone to have to, you know, spend 30 minutes in line for this one employer, get in there and get at the end of the line for another employer, and then the program is over because, you know, been an hour or an hour and a half, however long it'll be.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
We've had a really good summary from Andrea. Maybe, I think somebody was going to chime in. Maybe after them, Andrea can talk a little bit about what she's been doing, Andrea Hilton. But let's let whoever was about to jump in go first.
I was just going to say that I'd heard from a colleague at another school about Rally, which I had not heard of. It is in the very infancy stages apparently, but is sort of a cocktail party-esque. They have like background noise because it's from the various Zoom rooms, and so you can go in and out of cocktail tables. I haven't actually demoed it yet, but 2 people on my team looked at it and said it's really cool, but not necessarily for what we were looking for some of the more structured table talk. But it sounded worth at least checking out.
Yeah, Rally popped up on my list along with the other ones, which got 1 vote or maybe at most 2, were Hopin, Google Hangouts, Blackboard, Uconnect, BB collaboration, I think, Kaltura. Someone's using YouTube, Instagram, and then Brazen. And I think in the note from Andrea, and Andrea, it'd be great if you spoke to it. We started using Calendly as well, so that was something that now in my signature line, which is actually some of our faculty were doing previously, it's got a Calendly link to get to my Calendly page so they can book a meeting for whatever they want. But there's 2 direct links in there, one for a 30-minute, one for an hour meeting. The student could click on it, find the nearest time on my calendar, and then I set up a separate Calendly that has everyone in my office, and it just round robins based on who's available. So if the student wants to talk to someone specifically, they can. If they just want the next person, they don't care who's available based on their calendar, that's who they can go to. But Andrea Hilton.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, hi. I'm at Washington and Lee. We're small. We have about 120 students a class. So a lot of what we do is much less formal than what y'all at large schools do. But I've been frustrated by back and forth email scheduling for a millennium. And this was the thing that pushed me over the edge and said, all right, let's figure out how the grown-ups are doing this. So we did not purchase Calendly, so I'm just using the free version of Calendly, and I cannot say enough good things about it. So if you're willing to play with it, you can set up appointment types and appointment times. So I have a professional development choice and a career counseling choice and a 15-minute check-in choice. And I also did a standing Friday lunch that I called off the record, which was mostly just to catch up with students that I'm not seeing because, you know, I don't even recognize all of them in masks, to tell you the truth. Like 20-something blonde with mask is just a really big demographic. So it has worked really well, and each of the students who have made appointments that way, at the end of the appointment, I've asked them about their experience, and they really like it. I think the aspect of organizing a whole office's calendar requires you to actually buy the Calendly. And so we each have independent Calendly links. We send out an availability schedule that has all the counselors and what their hours and how they're available, that links directly. I see the chat, you know, we use 1220, and we do not use that module. I don't know why we've never used that module, but we never have, so.
Yeah, for us, the nice thing about Calendly, right, is that, and I assume in the free version it still does this, it's actually linked to our Outlook calendars. So
Yes.
it will not book where we have a conflict, right? So I can have something that's totally unrelated and the student can see those slots are unavailable to them without being able to see what my actual meetings are. And I can also restrict the hours when I'll allow Calendly to book.
Right.
And so I can sort of drive those behaviors.
And do you use the buffers too? You can prevent back-to-back interviews if you want to. You don't have to, but you can set those buffers. And if you use the purchased product, it will integrate Zoom. But since we're not using the purchased product, I've just, you know, gotten around that by using one of my appointment choices to be Zoom, and I just give students my individual room number.
Right.
So they just go into Zoom, put in that number, and I'm there. So I've been able to make it work with Zoom even without creating a Zoom, you know, appointment. So I can't, it's been fantastic. So the only other thing I'll mention is that we, and probably many of you, do sort of weekly chat events. We have a coffee a certain morning every week, and we get crowds of students, and that's how we know how they're doing and what's going on, and we get lots of updates that way that we wouldn't get through a more formal system, and we can't do that because it's just not safe to do so. So we got our food service outpost to let us sponsor coffee for a certain number of hours a week, and so it's now coffee on OCS, and we get that bill for that, and we hang out down there and say hi, you know, with masks on. So it's not as good, but it's at least an approximation and gets us seen.
So that raises an interesting question. Does anyone have, for schools that are virtual or largely virtual this semester, is anyone doing like a weekly sort of drop-in hangout event, and how are you driving students to show up at all?
Arturo, this is Tasha from Nebraska. We last spring when we went virtual, we continued, sounds like what the previous speaker, I can't remember who it was, we had bi-weekly coffees in the lobby, and then when we went online last spring, we just went into a Zoom room at the same times that they were used to coming to get free coffee, and at that time they were packed. We had a lot of people coming just to hang out and see how we're doing and ask a question. This fall, we've only been, you know, on campus since this last week. This is our first week with hybrid model. Some students here, some students at home. And we've had 2 open office hours like we had last year, and nobody showed up. So I haven't quite figured it out yet, but I think it's a matter of everybody getting used to the new normal. And we're going to start inviting people to speak for the first half of one of those hours. Like I'm going to invite an attorney, a local attorney, to talk to me, and that might bring some more people in. So the first half hour will be talking to somebody about some kind of law, and then the second half will just be questions. And I'm hoping that will get them back to participating. And if not, I'll just record that half hour and put it up somewhere they can listen to the conversation.
That's outstanding. Great to see you, Tasha. One of the, so one of my sort of thoughts on this is struggling again. You know, I like Remo as a possible solution, but that larger group thing begins to break down for me even quicker online in terms of trying to get a level of intimate interaction. So, excuse me, I mentioned this at the last time we had this conference, but it may be we have a different audience now, is when I was at Kansas, we had a thing we called jump starts where I would, or someone from my office would go to Johnny's, which is like the local pizza pub that's been there forever, and sit down with like 4 or 5 students and 2 alumni, and I'd buy cheap pizza, lousy beer, and soda, right? And we'd just talk for 2 hours about what was your experience like, you know, in law school and whatever else. A lot of that was frankly more directed at my middle and bottom third of my class, but it wasn't restricted. I'm going to do something similar here, and I was going to do it in person, but obviously that's not going to happen now. So for the jump starts here at Utah, it's actually an idea that a firm I think on the East Coast was doing that I'm like, we'll steal that. And they were doing it for interviews, but my plan is to, and I've already scheduled them, and I'm identifying who the attorneys are. The students just sign up, first come, first serve, but it'll be 5, maybe 6 students, 2 employers, 2 alumni is what they really are. It doesn't really matter if they're practicing or not. And then myself or one of my colleagues to act as a moderator to the extent the conversation dies out. And then everyone will receive a menu for the same restaurant, right, in the local area. And presumably most of my students are going to be locally in Salt Lake City, but if they're somewhere else nationally, I'll find either a chain or I'll find something that's similar cuisine. And everyone orders and we cover the bill. So that the idea is that they're still breaking bread together. We're still sitting down, right? And there's this awkwardness to eating on camera, certainly. But frankly, there's also a social skill that we need to teach students about how to eat in a room, period. I've had interesting dinner and lunchtime interview experiences, as I'm sure Linda has or has heard about. And so that's one of the things we're going to do. And I'm just planning to do, you know, I was originally thinking we might do 3 or 4 of those this year. I think I'm probably going to end up doing 6 or 7, maybe more of those. We have to pay for the food, which isn't super cheap because of delivery. But on the other hand, I'm not traveling anywhere. So we've saved actually a lot of money that we're not going to spend. And I've been able to convince my dean to spend that money elsewhere.
I'll be anxious to hear how that goes. I will tell you that for our summer class, we do a lot of meetings over the noon hour. And we continued that, and we suggested to them that they not eat during those meetings. Again, they're in an 8 or 10 week interview process.
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see how that works. And again, I mean, that's a little different because your purpose of, at least ostensibly, is to get together is to have food. But I will tell you, we recommended they not eat during the noon meetings.
Yeah, and I remember that. I actually think that's right. If you're going to have a big team meeting, you know, it can look pretty awkward if someone's chowing down. Anyone else, please chime in. It's really a conversation.
We've had a lot of chatter about simplicity as a way to schedule meetings, whether people are still using that. We at KU do still use simplicity to schedule counseling appointments. There are settings so that it will sync with your Outlook calendar. So like if you go into simplicity and say you're available from 9 to 2 for meetings, and then suddenly your dean puts something on your calendar for 1 to 2, it can sync so that simplicity will know not to offer those windows anymore. And we had a really nice offer from Kate Harrison at University of Detroit Mercy to offer trainings on how to do the settings. Sorry, Kate, now everyone knows.
And Kate, my father-in-law went to Detroit Mercy. So before it was Detroit Mercy, when I think it was just Detroit. So I had to make him a t-shirt that said Detroit No Mercy. That's just sort of a funny joke. But anyways, he is my father-in-law. What are you going to do? Got to keep in good with him. So going back to our topics, too much versus too little. So for my office, we've already planned out our year of programming. So literally where our day is Wednesdays and then we can leak over to Thursdays. So pretty much with the exception, I mean, I stopped programming about 3 weeks before finals, 4 weeks before finals. So just as a habit, but basically every other Wednesday is booked. And I'm trying not to overwhelm them. we've restricted ourselves to a Monday email at this point, sort of updating on here's 3 exciting jobs per class, here's 3 announcements. And then outside of having to have pointed, you know, either invites or other things because things are rolling, we're going to try and avoid talking to the students by that sort of mass medium and email them individually. So curious about anyone else. Also, when I was reading the registrations, someone had mentioned that they had created designated sort of check-in points when their office is pointedly reaching out with students to connect back, which I think is a brilliant idea. I'm not sure if that person's in our group, but I thought that was an interesting idea to sort of say, you know, in November on this date, we're going to reach back out to you and see how you're doing. So just be prepared for that.
We started doing individual 3L check-ins every fall a couple years ago, and that email's going out this afternoon, just 15 minutes for every single 3L, whether they've gotten a job or not, just to check in and see where they are. And those have been really successful. And we anticipate then we'll do follow-ups with those that are still seeking and those who need more help. But it's a way to identify those people that should continue to be on our radar versus those that are just kind of in maintenance.
Outstanding. So who else has ideas? Come on.
Arturo, we're doing a lot of pre-recorded programming, trying to look at that Zoom fatigue. So I see my colleague Gary Greener is on this session too, and he and others in my team have been spearheading those and doing a lot of great, you know, some of our nuts and bolts where they don't really need to be hearing from us and it's not networking with the employers. So we're trying to do a lot of those so that then the FaceTime programs are more the ones where they really need to be networking with each other. We're also looking at doing a couple of podcasts, like interviews with judges or other things where students get the information, but they might be able to do it when they're on a walk, or, you know, they don't have to be sitting on a screen and feeling that Zoom fatigue. And we're also asking employers, to the extent they have pre-recorded sessions, to send us those links, and we have a portal that we're going to make available to students with all of that information as well.
Beth, some of our participants were asking which format your nuts and bolts videos are using, which presentation format.
Gary, if you're still there, you could probably talk about this more. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm here. I'm doing mine as a voiceover PowerPoint, and I know others have been using that same format as well.
Thank you.
You know, one of the things that came up on the voiceovers and to some extent with PowerPoint, you can compensate by putting essentially all the words in the PowerPoint, is ADA compliance. As we're using technology, especially for people who are sight or hearing impaired. Someone, I think it may have been Angelica at Texas, had mentioned Panopto does sort of on the fly transcription or closed captioning, which requires. And when I looked at the event registrations, a lot of people were mentioning that. Well, a lot, 5 or 6 who had technology that did that. Several of them noted that they had to go back in and correct or clean up the closed captioning because it would get a little bit muddled. But I'm curious if, has anyone else figured out or is anyone else using a solution that they think is working quite well for that?
I can speak to that a little bit. At KU, when we do a recorded program that's a voiceover in particular, we start by creating the slides, and then we create a script of what we will say for each slide. So not just reading the slide verbatim, but, you know, the discussion that we would offer for each slide. And by creating a script like that, we then send that when we send it to be posted. And apparently we use YouTube, and YouTube offers a service where you can type in the closed captioning for each slide, and they use our script to do that. That way, you know, unless you go a little bit off the rails and you know, maybe change a few words here and there, you've got a pretty accurate closed captioning system.
Is anyone using Panopto?
I believe that's how we're going to have it posted. We use it at UCLA, and I believe we're sending it off to our IT department to be able to post it on Panopto.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
And but have you done it yet?
No. So our
Okay.
first.
Yeah.
We have used it in past years though with Panopto and some
And it's
videos.
reliable?
I think so. I mean, our IT department definitely spends a lot of time helping us
Sure.
get it all set, but yes, seems to be.
It's something we've thought about acquiring as a part of a broader license. You know, the other thing we were talking about, the fatigue, like when the talking about Remo, the thing I like about Remo is that all the other departments could use it for what they want to do. Everyone else is excited, because I think it's going to be hard for the students to come to us and learn one format of interaction and then go to student affairs for something else and then go to admission, you know, or having gone through admissions for something else or a faculty event or judicial clerkship event. So I'm hoping that whatever we acquire for the unit, not for ourselves, just in our department.
We're also getting comments that PowerPoint and Google Hangout have closed captioning services as well.
Nice. Are those fee services? Like, do they do it or do you do it yourself? Can anyone ask or chime in?
So I mentioned Google Hangout. Google Hangout it's free. The captioning services are free. I will say I don't know how it works when you record. Oh, sorry, I didn't remove my fancy thing to hide me all the time. I haven't used it as a recording service, but I've used it for small group chats when students enter, you know, and you know, there are smaller opportunities and windows, but yes, it will do it instantly.
Excellent. Lindsay, where are you from?
The University of Wisconsin, I'm sorry.
Oh, nice, welcome. You know, one of the other things, and we're about to, I think we're getting close to time here, are we? Yeah, we got about 7-8 minutes, is other students with disabilities. So we've been talking about, you know, students with neurological challenges of one form or another, right? So not just maybe hearing issues, not just maybe vision issues, but also like staring at a screen for an extended period of time can be, well, it's physically tiring for all of us. For some people, I think it could be actually pointedly painful and challenging. I don't know if anyone else has encountered that. I know that our student affairs person, Leilani Marshall, is fantastic and spent a lot of time surveying students using Qualtrics to try and find out who needed help. So we would develop accommodation systems that would support them in a way that maybe they wouldn't get called out as receiving an accommodation, which is also a part of that deal. I don't know if anyone else has seen anything or has any suggestions. No? Nobody? All right. Well, there you go. That was a very long pause. So we've got I think about 5-6 minutes. Questions from the group, or Heather? Do we have more stuff in the chat?
I do want to just mention that somebody said that Zoom actually auto-generates a transcript for things that are recorded, but it also offers a feature where you can edit it for accuracy, that you can see it before it's like published.
I have a quick question. This is Tasha from Nebraska again. I'm wondering, when we were talking about creating community, one of the things that our SBA is going to start next week, and they haven't done it yet, is try the having like a virtual lunchroom for anybody in the and I don't know how it's going to work. I wonder if anybody else has done that, if they've had any success with it.
I have not, and I'm not sure what our SBA. Maybe our SBA will do that with Remo if we acquire it and give them access.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like, Andrea, is that one of the things you mentioned in your comment earlier, Andrea Hilton, about having coffee drop-ins?
I did a lunch drop-in, but it's really just with me. And if it doesn't get much of a sign up, I'm going to start having special guest stars, but we haven't had anything massive, you know, as large as that proposal sounds.
So something out of left field for culture building is, and this actually came from our employee action committee, right? Sort of trying to figure out how do we keep staff engaged. They've done a lot of activities where, like yesterday we did one which was everyone reported 2 truths and 1 lie, or 2 lies and 1 truth about themselves. And then everyone else had to guess, right? So we sort of did that round robin. That was a fun activity for about 15 or 20 of us. Another thing we did was they started doing sort of like cooking videos of different people on the staff and the faculty. So I did one on how to make tacos dorados, right? Someone did one on how to make macarons. And, you know, again, it's a way to engage them. I think it's actually a way to engage students. You could do something similar, like, because I think one of the things that helps is for us to, especially for the 1Ls, right, to deformalize ourselves, right? Because right now I'm dean, whatever my name happens to be, or assistant dean or director, whatever, versus just being Arturo. And I've never used my title when I engage with students because I'm trying to get past that barrier, which I think in other departments you want a different interaction. But I'm trying to figure out a way to do that. So I am trying to figure out something like teaching them how to make tacos, which they may already know how to do. But frankly, because I look a little bit ridiculous, right? Because I'm walking around barefooted in my kitchen frying things. And so that's one of my thoughts, is to try and engage with the students at some point in the semester, and probably at multiple points where we're doing something that makes us potentially a little bit silly.
I think video blogs can be a way to achieve that as well. So, you know, a day in the life, like you just kind of, you know, turn on your phone and video blog, you know, the different kinds of things that you do in the course of an average day as a regular person that's not formal.
So our student affairs office in the late spring had something similar of just trying to pull culture together, and it was open to any student, faculty, or staff. And so they had different people on their team leading them based on what they were interested in. So they did all things K-pop. They did a get together for Spanish speakers, and they talked about Latinx businesses to support. They did a Netflix docuseries where they talked about Tiger King and Cheer. And then they did something on NBA. I know there was another thing of like, come and do your nails, do a mani-pedi, and we'll all be on screen and do that together. So it was kind of fun. NBA past and present was another one, but it gave everybody in the community options if they wanted to join in just for something fun and to hopefully keep building the culture. And I'm guessing they'll do something similar this semester, because I think it was, you know, a fun idea, and again, humanizing everybody.
As part of our summer program, we did by Zoom, have you never, have you ever? And of course, they were appropriate questions and allowed people then to drop off. And then those who remained were able to share some information about themselves. And we were trying to be really inclusive about so that we could highlight all the summers and their mentors. And that was really an easy way to get people to talk about themselves. We also did, and this is going to be too, I think, expensive for the schools. We didn't do a cooking session because we were a little worried about where people were and what kind of resources they had. And we're trying to be respectful, again, you know, for the summer program, that they may not be in their own homes. And so we ended up doing a painting session with an instructor, and we sent them everything. A little pricey for the schools, but that was very, very successful. We also we had division leaders host a Stinson Family Feud, where we just used Zoom, put them in separate breakout rooms, put them in teams. And that was pretty easy to do, very cost effective, just another idea.
Thanks. Anyone else have any cool sort of one-off programs? Or hear of them?
Some of our student peer mentors who work in pairs did a Zoom poll that was like Matt or Claire, and all the participants had to guess which fact applied to which person. And they seemed to think that was pretty successful in helping their mentees get to know them a little better.
Nice. Looks like we are being pushed into the other room. So with session 3, if you guys would start, I don't know who your sort of speaker is, but fill us in on how it went.
It was great. I wrote down a couple of quick notes, but Angelica, do you want to go first?
I thought we had a fantastic group who was very talkative, and we learned a lot. I think the highlight of the day were the snackable videos. Everyone loved that from Sandra Morris at UW. She gave us that takeaway.
But pray tell, what is a snackable video?
So we were talking about what's the ideal length of a pre-recorded video for, for digestion for our students. Are they actually going to watch it, right? So she said they have developed these, instead of a lunchtime video, they're called snackable videos because they aren't very long. They're about 6 to 7 minutes. And everyone said, yes, that's a great, it's a great tagline. It's awesome. So we like that.
Snack, you get time to watch.
Yeah, and then it made everyone hungry, but it's okay. It's okay. And we had to talk about that too. Like, how do we get students to participate when you have no food? So those are interesting challenges. And some people, actually, that was at the end of our discussion. So Pathways is what one group is using through Simplicity. And so we want to learn more about that. So that's
for my fellow NELP board members, please know that Elisa O'Brien has agreed to write an article about this and her knowledge and experiences with the Pathways program. So put that down for an upcoming issue. Yeah, we had we had so many great participants talking about how they were moving some of their spring programming into fall, but leaning into the silver lining of COVID, which is with the virtual world, you can invite employers from all over. So whereas in the past, some mock interview programs might have been focused on who was in the area, now you can invite alums from anywhere, and employers love it because it keeps them in front of your students, and it's a nice, easy way to market and brand a little bit. So if you haven't already thought about expanding your mock interview program, maybe start making a longer list of employers outside of your immediate area. We did talk about some challenges, including the fact that with block scheduling and longer times to move between classes for those who had classes that were live in buildings, that the amount of time available for, say, lunchtime programs has shrunk. In addition to research that shows that even if you had a full hour, maybe you don't want to use a full hour for a live Zoom program in the way that you might have had students' attention for a full hour in a live program. And so the research is saying that if you're doing a live program as opposed to an asynchronous snackable bite, you might want to think about limiting it to 30 minutes or less. Those were kind of the things that stuck in my mind. But again, I just want to thank everybody who was in our room for sharing such great information. I think it was really helpful for me, and I hope for everybody else too.
So I think I'll ask my co-presenters to sort of chime in about different topics that were brought up. Overarching, we were trying to think about how do you translate culture using either technology? Can you bring the existing culture of the school into the building, or do we need to invent a new kind of culture? And we also covered, how do we draw students in with different kinds of programs? What have we heard about people doing? When is there too much fatigue? Is there a way to get sort of those virtual water cooler type things going? So one of the ones that I contributed was a Jumpstart program that we used to do in person at my prior institution, and we're going to move virtual here, where it's limited usually to 4 or 5 students, a couple of alumni, and then one proctor from the school. And we used to do those in person at a pizza joint, and I would buy pizza and cheap beer and soda, and we'd sit around and talk for an hour and a half. We're not going to be getting together physically, but my idea is to do that remotely in a way where we'll send everyone the same menu so they can order, and we'll have the food delivered so that we'll all sit down and be eating the same food at the same time with those 2 alumni, 5 students, and one of us from the office, and try and get those sort of organic interactions. Another thing that I shared was that in trying to figure out how to translate culture, I've been trying to figure out how to get that informal engagement. So not quite a full formal career fair, but also not just sort of randomly connecting people. And one of the platforms that I'm thinking of acquiring to do that, but also because it works for student affairs for what they want to do in alumni relations, is something called Remo, that was actually brought to me by our SBA. And our SBA students have used it, I think, as part of their SBA National Conference. As users, I thought it was great. Our student affairs people thought it was great. I've checked it out, thought it was great. And it has this sort of, the metaphor there is that you're in a big conference room, right? So with a bunch of tables set up all over the room, and then the users can literally jump from table to table to table at will, and you're suddenly in that conversation with those 4, 5, 6, up to 8 people, I think, at a table. And you can label the tables per firm, and you can do some branding. So I thought that was an interesting solution. Beth, what did you get out?
I think there was a lot of great information. I'll say a couple of the things that we had talked about was the Zoom fatigue and trying to pre-record a lot of our nuts and bolts programs so that people are not that they can spend their Zoom time with our alumni and employers and do the networking piece instead of just when it's our office talking about what they need to know for OCI. So some of that, and then I also had talked about, I think several of us had talked about just culture generally and some of the things that the school is doing. And so, trying to do some informal events where whether it's faculty and staff checking in with every single student and making sure that everybody's okay and just that human aspect, but then also doing some events on that any student, faculty, or staff can pop into on K-pop and on Netflix docuseries like Tiger King and Cheer and a book club and those kinds of things too. So those were some of the culture things that that I had contributed, but there were a lot of great takeaways from a lot of people and a lot of different potential vendors that we talked about too. So I think we've all been doing lots of demos.
I did kind of create a summary of some of the interesting platforms that were discussed along the lines of what Arturo mentioned for Remo. Gatherly takes that one step further, I guess, and has floors and elevators as well as tables to kind of reenact that career fair vibe. Brazen offers something similar. And then there was an interesting one mentioned called Rally, which sort of reconstructs a cocktail party, sort of an atmosphere with a little bit of background noise and things, which may be not perfect for like a career fair, but maybe really good for a networking event. So those were some of the interesting technologies that were discussed. We also had some great ideas about different ways to sort of get to that level of connecting on a more personal basis, as opposed to just here's a program, watch this. Some of that informal, like getting to know each other. There were some two lies and one truth, and going in a smaller group trying to figure out which one's the truth about each person. There was Linda had a great suggestion from that her firm tried. It was I think you called it Matt or Claire, and they would give a fact, and then the participants would try to guess if that was relevant to Matt or to Claire. So video blogs of a day in the life of, maybe the Dean for Career Services, cooking with kind of a show of different staff or faculty members, just preparing a meal, things of that nature to connect on that personal level.
Yeah, I thought, Linda, your suggestion that Linda's at Stinson, for their summer clerks, they sent them all a painting kit and they all did painting lessons together, which is a crazy great idea. I guess it was expensive, but like I could go down and buy like really cheap painting sets and just send everyone a paint by numbers kit, I think, right? Because like nothing would be more ridiculous than fun. What were you showing us, Pascal?
Northwestern did it. This is the easel that I got from them now. And I still use it as like a paper holder on my desk now. So it has its long-standing uses after the painting is done.
So you did that with your students?
No, it was the Law Staff Appreciation Council sent it out to all the staff members.
Very nice. Very nice. Heather, you look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, there was also a lot of interest in platforms that allow folks to have like an open Zoom room where students can all come in and just kind of chit chat in the way that you would around a water cooler, or if you have free coffee in your career services office or something, and students just kind of come in and all get to chat, that you could sort of recreate that by having an open chat room where students can drop in and talk not only to you, but to each other and have a group discussion.
Very cool. And our dean actually is sponsoring a book club. And it's a different book every month, and the students and the staff are invited to participate, and that's gone really, really well. So she has like this monthly Zoom discussion about the books, the book, whatever it is. For next month, it's Hispanic Heritage Month, so we've been selecting a book that's Latin American focused. I'm in the DEI committee, so I've been helping with that selection. But it's actually an interesting idea, and it's a nice way for your dean to connect with students who they're not seeing day to day. So another idea. Anything else anyone wants to say? If not, I'll do some closing remarks and we can go on about our day. Anyone? I'll give you a second to turn off mute because I'm always talking with mute still on.
Thank you for your vision, Arturo. We appreciate it very much.
No, thank everyone else. And I appreciate that from everyone. Actually, hold your applause for the people who really deserve it. So I actually want to thank again, I know our dean did this, but the events and IT team are just ridiculous, and they've stepped in an extraordinary way. So I want to thank Chris Monty, Spencer Cope, Charlie Stewart, Jonelle White, and everyone else who helped participate to do the back end of this, because they're the ones who make it work so that all of us, right, this is true at all of our schools, but certainly so that Jacqueline and I could sort of, put on a coat, show up, again, a coat, not, I'm still wearing shorts, I'm not going to wear pants, but could put on a coat, show up and do a program, right? And that's extraordinary. So honestly, a huge thank you to them. I appreciate all that they do, and it's extraordinary. I will endeavor for all of the panelists, if you will send me sort of summaries or any collected information you want in a summary, please send it my way. For anyone who maybe suggested a product or an idea or a way to do it, you can also feel free to send that to me sometime this weekend with a little explanation. I'm not going to really create a fancy, pretty document, but I will compile those in some sort of form that's vaguely comprehensible, along with all of the responses to the questions that we got at registration, because I think those will be really useful. And I'll try and get that out sometime next week, hopefully early next week. And as ever, if anyone needs anything, do not hesitate to reach out and contact me. And I'm sure that's true for everyone else. With that, thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists, and we'll see y'all soon. Be safe.